Good morning, and welcome to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public meeting and public hearing for May 5th, 2026. We're going to begin by taking attendance, and I'm going to ask our legal counsel, Mark Silverman, to call the roll.
Vice Chair Master,
Here.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Here.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quimby,
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Here.
Commissioner Mann,
Here.
Commissioner Wilder.
This meeting is being held in our hearing room at 253 Broadway on the second floor. It is also being held via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube for anyone who would like to participate remotely. We're going to begin with a public meeting agenda for items which have already had a public hearing, and then move to a public hearing agenda for new applications on our designated properties. Now I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala.
Thank you, Vice Chair Master. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting item number 1, LPC 26-02776, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1217, Lot 1, 165 West 86th Street, the West Park Presbyterian Church individual landmark. This is a Romanesque Revival-style church complex designed by Henry Franklin Kilburn and built in 1889 to 1890, which incorporated an existing chapel designed by Leopold Eibletz and built in 1883 to 85. The application is to demolish the building pursuant to Section 25-309B2 on the grounds of hardship. This was last presented at the public meeting of March 10th, 2026. No action was taken at that time. I'll now turn it back to Vice Chair Master.
So, Commissioners, today we're going to hear from 3 of LPC's consultants regarding the West Park Presbyterian Church hardship application. Frank Fortino, founder and president of the Metropolis Group, will discuss the issue of when work or changes to occupancy trigger compliance with current fire, building, and accessibility codes. Don Friedman of Old Structures Engineering and LPC's consulting engineer will discuss a recommended scope of work and phasing of that work. Finally, Keith Brennan of Weitzman, a consulting appraiser for LPC, will discuss his analysis of reasonable economic return issues, including transfer of development rights. Please feel free to ask questions during and immediately after each presentation. All of the consultants will remain available until the end of the item. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Fortino to begin.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Frank Fortino. I'm the president and CEO of Metropolis Group. We have been a consulting firm for zoning and building codes and dealing with the Department of Buildings, Landmarks, Department of Transportation, and other city agencies to interpret and file applications with the Department of Buildings and other agencies and obtain approvals. I was asked to appear before you. And I also wanted to mention the fact that I did review the CCI's report, which I agree with the scenario of providing any floor area or changes of dominant use will require a certificate of occupancy, and we'll consider to put things into compliance in full cooperation for the New York City Building Code. I will say that, secondly, well, I also reviewed and also discussed the WJE submission, which I agree with their conclusion. I'll tell you, on the second issue of focusing on the question of Don Friedman's scope of work, they do it approximately $10 million for repair, predominantly on the exterior over a 7 to 10 year period, would trigger a mandatory compliance. But when you're doing exterior work, it is all about safety, providing the right workmanship and repairs, and accordances with the constructability requirements of the New York City Building Code. I will say that the building itself does not have a certificate of occupancy. Therefore, for the purpose of its existing use of religious organizations that have been maintained over the past years, the space is commonly known, and it's true that it can maintain the existing conditions of how it operates. Now, I use this term that I like to use the understanding of doing exterior work and interior work in two different buckets. And the reason why I say that is because no matter what you do on the exterior, it's considered to be repairs, maintenance, or anything to withhold the safety of the community, that does not add or trigger any new compliance for providing or obtaining a certificate of occupancy. Any interior work that goes within upgrades for interior uses, establishing a new use or creating additional occupancy of the building, that would trigger a certificate of occupancy into the building itself. I would like to add that there are thresholds that you need to comply whenever you're doing interior work based on the percentages over a 12-month period. And those thresholds are usually the 30% of minimal for compliance of the overall assessed value of the property that will provide any new code for the area that you're proposing work for. The 60%, when you're showing work that would be based on the assessed value, that would trigger for the whole building to be put into compliance. And therefore, a new certificate of occupancy would be provided for the entire building. Now, the Department of Buildings does have two different ways and options to actually calculate these thresholds. One is an assessment of the property under the assessed value, and then the other is the actual replacement cost. Now, the assessment value is, basically documented and posted on the financial Department of Finances, that you could see what that cost would be. And when you have a replacement cost, that would be evaluated by a financial group that would come in and evaluate what the replacement cost would be for not only the building, but also what the replacement cost would be for the work that's being proposed. My experiences over the past years is all based on the actual replacement cost that gives the non-for-profit a greater flexibility addressing these codes for each one of the uses. And the non-for-profit organization has a way to, establish whatever work that's being done on the inside of the building to evaluate what the best design that would fit for the church, in this case, or for the actual constructability. I will stress that my comments, not whether or not it's preferable to do one or the other on the assessed value or the replacement cost, but it needs to be evaluated and show what the best use for that particular build out would be. So as I was saying earlier, there are two factors that you could actually use in order to design the space and work within your benefit. And that would be 60% of the assessed value, which obviously would only work within the areas that you're doing work for. Or if you provide greater, because you want to do all the work at one time, if you reach the portion of 60%, then that will evaluate a whole entire new certificate of occupancy for the space. Have any questions that I could answer?
Commissioner Goldblum and then Commissioner Ginsburg.
Thanks. A few questions.
Yes.
First of all, the existing building code is coming. Were you able to review that and how that might affect these conversations?
The new building code is actually a little bit more flexible in terms of, it still requires the option of providing assessed value component, or the replacement value component. But there isn't much of a difference, except that, you know, you're able to actually separate the work and provide, you know, in any 12-month period, phased work that goes on into a building. Therefore, you can actually rebuild the space to make it look and function the way you need it to function, but at any given time, doesn't have to obtain a new C of O.
So I'm not understanding that 12-month phased window. If let's say in a case of, you know, in this case, the building does not meet egress or ADA codes or fire codes, current codes, that is, would they be able to phase the work out to comply if, let's say, that the work exceeded the 60% threshold? And how long would they be able to phase it out over?
Well, on the interior design is based on what work you're going to physically do. So as it exists today, the building could continue to exist the way it is, as long as you're not applying any new proposed work on the interior side. If you decide that there is a proposed design for creating a whole new build out of a space, then you got to take into consideration the mechanical work that's going in. You got to take consideration fire protection, which includes fire alarm, any plumbing work for ADA compliance on bathrooms. And of course, obviously, if it involves an open stair where it should be an enclosed stair, just for simplicity, then that all has to be provided for compliance only in that space, as long as it's within the 30% of the assessed value. If you exceed it, then the entire building. But like I said earlier, if you go over 60, then you have to provide plans for the entire building to comply with the new code as well as new certificate of occupancy.
And the 30%, 60%, you said you could either use the assessed value based on the tax rolls or on the an assessment that the ownership would make using estimators today.
Mhm.
That's the owner's choice.
It would be the owner's choice, yes.
But so in that case, one would imagine that reconstructing a historic 18th century church with lots of nice finishes and stuff would probably be more than its assessed value, which would raise the threshold at which, you know, these automatic compliance targets would hit, right? So
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. The ability to maintain the interior as it is currently configured hinges on the retention of the current use, right?
The current use, yes.
Right. So since the building has no C of O, and obviously if another church bought the building, then the current use would be maintained. Since there's no C of O and since the brackets of categories are somewhat, you know, they've changed over the years and you can use different codes at different times to apply, how would a potential user judge what uses were consistent with the current status if there's no C of O saying what that status is?
Well, there's a few different ways. One of them, you would have to go into your historical archive records and see what language they use to establish the uses. It's very difficult to establish how many people would be occupying that space, but you might get lucky and find out that there is, you know, 20 people in the occupancy, depending on what year you're looking at. The facts are, if the current manager, along with the current church organization, continue to use the space as it exists, there isn't any, you know, anything else that comes along with it. You would need to do some historical research and then you could prove that out. But assuming that there is a change, like let's just say there is an after-school business that comes in, a daycare center or whatnot, that clearly is a change to the certificate of occupancy. Well, excuse me, a change to the current use, which means that you would have to apply for a new certificate of occupancy. And therefore it would trigger, you know, co-compliance for that particular use.
One last thing. So if another use comes in, it can come in without triggering the C of O change if the church retains its usage as well, right?
It would have to, well, it'd have to be, the church would be the operator and the manager.
Hmm.
And then it could still establish, we kept status quo.
Thank you.
I have a question. My understanding of the new existing building code, instead of monetary value, is based on square footage, which is not what you said. I'm pretty sure of that since I was involved in writing it.
Yeah, that I am not aware of, sir. Sorry.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Mahan?
Thank you for your presentation. Just a couple points of clarification. So on the topic you were just speaking of about the potential change of use, are you saying that so long as the church remains the landlord, so to speak, that the use, the actual use can change without triggering the need for a new C of O?
No.
Okay.
No, what I was saying,
Okay.
Commissioner, was that the church and would be the operator
Yeah.
and the manager, the
Right.
way it exists today, in order for it not to receive a new certificate of occupancy for that particular use that they established. So if today, historically, they used a space within the building that allowed after-school programs and all, they could
Okay.
continue that. But if they elaborate a little differently and they create a daycare center, now that itself, that daycare center, they would have to actually be the operator and manager to not change certificate of occupancy.
Yeah.
Have to stay within the parameters of.
Why does the operator affect what the predominant use of the building is? My understanding is that triggering the need for a new C of O typically would be caused by the change in the predominant use. So I think there's two factors in my understanding. I don't have the expertise that you do. It's the predominant use, that definition, as well as well, yeah, I'll stop.
There are
there.
certain accessory uses allowed
There, right,
Yeah,
you can have
in
accessory
association with the
uses,
predominant use.
That's correct.
but I don't understand, I guess, why, the kind of landlord-tenant relationship plays into the use and the
Determination.
need for a change of use.
Well, because there is a different mindset, again, the church established its community functions, and that community functions continues. The minute that there is a new operator or a new owner, if you will, that could potentially grow, and it would change the platform of what it normally exists. And it's kind of hard to not create or use the church facility and prove that there isn't any change. It would have to be exactly as, it would be seamless, right? It would have to continue its own use and its own occupancy throughout the rest of its years.
Thank you. I want to just clarify one other point that was just discussed. Commissioner Goldblum was asking about how the value of the building is established, which effectively creates the denominator in the equation for calculating the 30% and 60% thresholds. Can you clarify, when the owner chooses which method, does the DOB just automatically accept that, or is there any negotiation, or
No,
might
there's
they perhaps reject your owner established replacement value?
When you go under well, let me go back to an assessment value is already recorded on the Department of
course.
Finance. So that is an automatic,
That's no,
right?
right,
That's an automatic.
exactly.
When you come in and you want to prove a replacement value, you will need to hire someone like a JLL or Cushman and Wakefield to go in and evaluate everything that the property has. What's the current value, the market value? What is the replacement cost of construction? Each limestone, each window, each door, what is it that it would be today's cost to it? And having said that, that would have to be evaluated by the Department of Buildings on an overview first read look and see if they would be accepted.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Chan?
Resolve. Okay, that's better. Yeah, just to follow up on the other commissioner's question about the threshold. So if the church is not the main operator, and I presume there'll be some sort of tenants, in your professional experience, what's likely the minimum threshold that would trigger a new CFO?
If the church now introduces a tenant and goes into a lease contract, and that tenant, conducts business in the community, then that would automatically trigger the requirements of complying with new code, as well as obtaining the certificate of occupancy. It would be for that portion only, that space only.
And in application to that 30 or 60%, what will be the threshold?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
In regard to the threshold as to the 30%, if the tenant is only occupying a portion of the church, what triggers it?
Well, the 30% that I was referring to is based on the cost of construction versus the assessed value of the property. And then that would automatically, you start applying the codes that are under those thresholds in order to build out the space.
So in terms of the occupancy of the tenant, the new tenant that is taking over a portion of the church, is there a percentage there in your mind?
I'm not aware of that. Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions? Okay, thank you so much. We really appreciate your help.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Now we're going to call up Don Friedman.
Good morning. My name is Donald Friedman. I am the president of Old Structures Engineering, structural consulting firm. We are under contract to the Landmarks Commission to provide structural review on various projects. In that capacity, I've reviewed documents submitted since 2022 with regard to the West Park Presbyterian Church, specifically the condition of the exterior envelope of the building and the structure of the roof and the supporting masonry. Documents reviewed include engineering and architectural reports by Facade MD and Severud Engineering, both of whom are working for the applicant, and Wisjani Elsner, WJE, who is working for the center at West Park, the tenant. We reviewed a whole bunch of documents, but those were the main ones. I also visited the site twice in 2023, including with some of the commissioners. I did not review the architectural and occupancy issues at the interior. The building is structurally in fair condition. There are two well-documented problems that have been the focus of my work and the reports that I read. First, structurally, there's outward movement of the gable end of two gable end walls, one on the south facade at 86th Street, one opposite on the north facade. Temporary bracing was installed by the applicant in 2022. It is temporary. Permanent repair is required. Secondly, there's deterioration of the brownstone veneer, which I think is the thing that everybody's very much focused on, which covers the two street facades and portions of the other facades. I want to note that there is not much structural damage that has been noted at the backup masonry. It's the veneer that is the problem. So the walls are not collapsing. The veneer is peeling off them in various ways. Obviously, the veneer damage is a safety hazard. That's why there's been a sidewalk shut up for quite some time. There's been little or no maintenance for a long time. The brownstone conditions continue to deteriorate. I'm going to get at the end to some of the past issues at the building and past reviews of the conditions. Just want to say for the record, I've been in the building twice before, once in 2000 and again in 2011. So I've actually seen the deteriorations get worse over the last 25 years or so. In terms of the structural work, I should point out that several engineers disagree with my assessment of the cause of the gable end walls moving. Wistiani Elster more or less agrees with me. It doesn't really matter. And the reason it doesn't really matter is we all agree on the form of the repair, which is that those walls have to be tied back to the roof. That's the first reason. Second is that the most recent cost estimate I've seen from the applicant, which is dated September of last year, the cost of the steel work for the repair was $250,000, which is less than 2% of their total for trades work that is required. I don't think that a single line item that's less than 2% of the total is what's driving this whole conversation. So yes, the walls need to be tied back in the attic. That work is required. It is not a major component in the cost. And if I step outside of my technical focus for a second, if it's not a major component of the cost, it's not a major component in the hardship. The facade work is much more involved, obviously. In my reviews, I have used the Department of Buildings FISP program guidelines. That is the Facade Inspection and Safety Program, otherwise known as Local Law 10, Local Law 11. This building is not subject to FISP. This is, according to the building department, a 3-story building. FISP only applies to buildings that are over 6 stories. It is, however, a 3-story building that is taller than quite a few 10-story buildings. So the fact that legally FISP does not apply, and I'm going to keep saying that, it does not apply. However, it is a very useful framework for examining the safety of facade conditions on buildings, and particularly tall buildings. If the building were 2 stories high, the facade repairs, actually 2 stories high, 20 feet high, the facade repairs would be much simpler than they are given the height of the tower and the complexity of some of the masonry that is very high up. So we have with FISP a program that the Department of Buildings has spent more than 45 years developing, and which gives a consistent and generally accepted way to evaluate the safety of facade conditions. In other words, my opinion on what's safe and unsafe may be different than another engineer's or an architect or another architect's, but the building department has a consistent set of guidelines that they have basically forced on the community, and we've all gone along with it. This is how you judge safety of a facade. And anybody who does facade inspections knows what we have to say, how we have to define things to get it through the building department. So it is a very consistent set of guidelines. There are 3 possible categories for facade conditions. Safe and unsafe, I think, are pretty self-explanatory. The one in the middle is usually referred to as SWARP, which is safe with a repair and maintenance program, which is to say something that is SWARP is damaged, but it is not currently unsafe. It needs to be repaired in the future. This is, again, this category has been around longer than I've been practicing. I started in FISP cycle 2 and we're now in cycle 10. Finally, FISP works on a 5-year cycle, and that reflects the reality of facade repair. You don't repair a building and walk away and say, you're done, everything is okay. You repair the building knowing that it will continue to age, it will continue to weather, and in 5 years, there may very well be new conditions that you didn't know about now. So FISP forces you into a mindset of what is unsafe today, what is damaged but not unsafe today, and what is fine. And knowing that in 5 years, the things that are damaged and not currently unsafe may become unsafe. I think that is a good way to look at facades in general. I've used it on quite a few buildings that are not FISP buildings, either because they're not in New York City or because they are under 7 stories tall. My recommendations, and goes back to 2023, were that the immediate hazards be stabilized to be made safe. And that can be done by netting. It can be done by selective removal of veneer elements. It can be done by shoring for projecting ornament. These are all standard things that happen in FISP work. I want to also point out, and this is partially in a response to something that was said in the back and forth in writing 3 years ago. There are some 16,000 buildings in New York City subject to FISP. And every time a professional files a report on them, they are making an official statement under seal. This is what will be safe for the next 5 years. We are predicting the future. We're not all entirely comfortable with it, but that is the reality of it. So it is already standard practice for people to say this damaged facade will be safe for the next 5 years if the following steps are taken. Moving on to the applicant's estimate. So the current estimate, which is from September of last year, is basically the estimate from 2023. I think they wrote it in 2022 with 3 years of escalation and some minor changes to the scope. It's pretty much the same estimate with escalation added. In the current document, the cost of brownstone restoration is $13.8 million out of $16.9 million in the subtotal of the trade estimate. In other words, you have the subtotal is the cost for materials and labor to do all the work. And then on top of that is added percentages for contingencies, insurance, escalation, and so on. So the cost of brownstone is 13.8 out of 16.9 million in the subtotal, or 24.5 out of 30 million in the total. That's where the cost is. And keep in mind that a fair percentage of the part that's not the brownstone itself is things like access, putting pipe scaffold up around the entire tower. I believe that restoration cost is overestimated as to what is required for safety in several ways. First of all of the damage is treated as needed immediate repair. Not all of it is an immediate hazard. There is damage there that could be, again, using the FISP framework, could be treated as safe with a repair and maintenance program. It will almost certainly need work down the road, but down the road might be 20 years from now. The other thing is that they are looking at full stone replacement and other forms of making it safer available. In the last few years, the Department of Buildings has become very interested in the concept of using netting and similar forms of stabilization to make facades safe, basically on the theory that having netting it is much cheaper and much faster to install, and it makes the building safe and decouples the safety hazard from the owner's ability to raise money. I want to point out that the facade of the building, and I think, again, this is reasonably well known, consists of 2 types of brownstone: a softer reddish stone, which was used for all of the carved ornament, and a somewhat tougher, it's brownstone, so it's not tough, but a somewhat tougher brownstone that is used for the field of the facade. Nearly all of the unsafe conditions today are in the red stone, in the carved ornament, and particularly carved ornament in brownstone tends to just fall apart. And that is exactly what's seen at this building. The reason that I'm bringing this up is that most of the damage is in a relatively small percentage of the wall area, which makes something like netting or, again, targeted removal of stones much easier to do than if it was the entire field of the wall that was falling apart. In general, the scope of repair that was used by the applicant is replacement of entire veneer stones. And this veneer is something on the order of 8 inches thick. That seems to me to be a very nice form of repair. It's a thorough repair. It's not necessary. The stones can be resurfaced, they can be cut back, and a new thinner veneer placed over them and pinned in place. The new veneer doesn't have to be brownstone. I think the commission has a long history of allowing substitute materials for brownstone, given that stone's poor performance in our climate. In 2023, I estimated the cost for stabilizing the immediate hazards in order to be able to remove the shed, to be able to say it was safe for people to walk down the street past the building, as 1.7 million, and the cost for addressing all of the known facade damage that needed to be addressed as a bit under $10 million. This would not get the facade to a pristine condition. This would simply repair the damage as if it were an ordinary facade problem. Those numbers have to be adjusted for escalation for 3-year, for escalation in terms of price. As I think people know, there has been some inflation in the last few years. Also, there has been further deterioration because nothing has been addressed. The immediate work is a limited scope, and one of the nice things about netting is that it can be done from a boom truck. You don't necessarily need to put pipe scaffold up around the entire building. So that makes it faster and less expensive. I believe the immediate work could be done in about 3 months after it received filing approval. The longer term work, as Frank Fortino mentioned before, I had said 7 to 10 years. I said that 3 years ago. I would now say 5 to 10. It's been another 3 years. It continues to deteriorate. Based on the applicant's judgment of what has gotten worse in the last few years, it's the same kind of damage. It's not a change in quality of damage. It's a change in quantity. More stone has degraded. So there have been several reviews of this building over the years. As I said, in 2000, there was a review of the structure of the roof and the general condition of the exterior envelope by Thornton Tomasetti engineers. I was technically in charge of the structural portion of that. I was not very much involved on a day-to-day basis, but I did go to the building at that point and read the report at that time. And then in 2011, and actually 2010, 2011, 2012, the Landmarks Conservancy was working there to try to help the church deal with its problems. I was working for the Landmarks Conservancy on the building at that point in terms of interior plaster and the roof structure. Interestingly enough, my name got put on the report for the facade, even though I really had nothing much to do with that. I may have exchanged a few emails with people, but I saw the report recently and my name is on it. So that's nice. In the 2011 facade estimate, they followed roughly the same type of break that I did, which is immediate work for safety and then future work. The scope in 2011 for immediate work was $800,000, roughly the same idea as my 1.7 million 13 years later. The scope for all of the work was $14.5 million for a scope roughly similar to the $30 million estimate we have today. So things have gotten a bit worse. There's also some 15 years of escalation built in there. But the basic problems have not changed, and the basic approach has not changed, which is that the immediate hazards can be stabilized to buy time to deal with the rest of the problems, which can then be dealt with piecemeal in the future, much as is true with any other facade. There is no such thing as finishing a facade project. You simply finish it for now, and in 5 or 10 years, you're going to come back and work on it again. This building is not exempt from that sort of rule of how you work on facades. Thank you very much. Questions?
I have a quick question. Don, you had said that in 2023, the immediate cost to repair was 1.7.
Yes.
So what would it be now?
I did not revisit my estimate. I would say probably still below $2 million, but I don't have an exact number.
Okay. My other question was, you had said in 5 to 10 years, about $10 million to do kind of more of the facade, but then you also had a $30 million figure.
The $30 million is the applicant's estimate.
Okay. For the exterior only.
No, that's for quite a bit of work. It includes new fire stairs. It includes full restoration of all of the stained glass. That's a big scope.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chu, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Don, for that very informative summary. So just so I understand, and you did put a lot of numbers out there. If you were to follow what you describe as a good guideline example of how to address this facade and its future restoration, you would therefore, this would be classified as a swamp approach.
right now
A
it's
swamp
unsafe.
approach, and it's done in a 5-year cycle generally in terms of its maintenance program.
Right now, it's unsafe.
Right.
Okay. So you spend the immediate money to get it to swarm. You're not going to get it to safe because, for example, netting doesn't get it to safe. It gets it to swarm.
Okay.
And,
And
and then going forward, so one of the ways that FISP works, which we don't necessarily have to apply to this
Right.
building, is that anything that is swarmed 5 years later becomes automatically unsafe. The building department says if you have a building that is subject to FISP, if you say something is swarmed in the current cycle, it automatically becomes unsafe, whether or not its physical condition has changed. What they don't want is something to be considered swarmed cycle after cycle after
cycle after
cycle.
cycle. So when you looked at your numbers and your classification of immediate work versus long-term, and you look at it, obviously there's different levels of intervention of restoration that you've made very clear. The current estimate is, one of the estimates is based on, I guess, a more gold standard approach, Dutchman full pieces that replaced brownstone, as opposed to alternate materials, replacing original fabric. These things are different scales of cost.
That's the difference between my estimate and
Right.
the applicant's estimate.
Okay.
They are looking at what you're calling the gold standard.
Right, exactly. So based on your estimates, you break down your approach at how you could address this work in still a safe manner, according to the standards that are applied by SWARMP, basically.
Yes,
Yes.
and yes, and I'm assuming that any permanent work that is done will have to meet LPC guidelines.
Right.
Obviously, right?
And in that assessment, you categorized immediate work and then obviously a long-term work, which is a phased effort. Now, that total amount of work, does that address what you think the whole building needs from an exterior perspective, or is other work potentially beyond that period in cost?
That addresses everything that is unsafe or swamp today,
Today,
right? And 10 years from now, a piece of stone that today looks okay may be damaged.
okay, and this is typical for a lot of our older historic buildings that with time, then you have to readdress and maintain.
I would say it's typical for all of them.
For all of them, okay. And the total amount that you had initially set, again, I'm sorry, just because there's so many numbers
I
here.
understand.
I know you didn't escalate it, but when you did look at the numbers in 2023, the numbers came out to a total of
A bit under 10 million.
total,
Yes.
with 1.7 or 2 that
As
was the
part of that.
immediate work, total being 10.
Yes, including the 1.7.
2 plus 8.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mahan?
Thank you for the report, Mr. Friedman. You spent most of your time discussing the facade work. That was all very clear. I was curious about the first issue that you addressed, which is the two gable ends leaning outwards towards the street. Sounds alarming, but the estimates for steel to reinforce those apparently is under $250,000. I was wondering if you could just speak a bit more to what is involved in that work. It sounds low for the sort of risk that what it sounds like.
So, absolutely. First, let me just say that in my opinion, and which Jenny Elsner came to, I think, the same conclusion, the reason for the tilt is that those walls were never tied back to the roof structure. They've been freestanding for 140 years, and that's not good for masonry. The, the fix is to tie them to the roof structure. Severed's solution, the $250,000, is to literally tie all the way across the roof so the two outward tilted walls are tied to one another. It's one way to do it. I think that could be simplified, but as I said, I don't want to get into that because the total cost is so low. I guess the way of looking at it is a standard rule of thumb for masonry is that it's safe, if it's tilted, it's safe if the tilt is within the middle third of the thickness of the wall. So if you have a 12-inch wall, it could be tilted up to 3 inches. This wall is tilted more than that. However, if it's tied to the building, it's no longer the wall itself that's tilted, it is the whole building out of plumb. In other words, you could have an entire masonry wall building that's a foot out of plumb, and if the building is 20 feet wide, it has to be within the middle third of that 20 feet. So by tying it to the roof structure, you change it from a problem of an individual wall to the building as a whole. And the building as a whole, as I said, is in structurally reasonably good condition. That's why it's not expensive, is that you're not dealing with an individual wall. You're turning it into an integral part of the building, and the building isn't moving.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, very interesting discussion. And I'm just thinking that, you know, the approach seems to be that we want to defer and kicking the can down the road. I was interested in your assessment of not necessarily the soft brownstone on the top, on the carving, but on the facade, so to speak. Would you, in your professional opinion, tie back whether it's alternative material or a new surface to the existing harder brownstone?
So I just want to say that no, I haven't seen any evidence of it, and the applicant didn't say at any point that there is separation between the veneer and the backup masonry. So tying the veneer stones is not an issue here, because the existing ties, which are literally just that the veneer is built into the backup, seem to be working.
But as a guardian of a religious organization, church, as a historic landmark, is it prudent to tie back that to a material that we know is not that solid?
If there was any sign of movement, I would say yes. But if there's no sign of movement, you're addressing a problem that isn't evident, and that seems to be waste of money.
So hypothetically, if there's a donor that comes in and want to donate to the church and says, I would like to redo the facade, what would your professional recommendation be?
For permanent repair.
For the front facade stone?
Yeah, the carved stone is going to need to be replaced with, I would suggest cast stone, but that's an open discussion. Carved stone is going to need to be either cut out to 3 or 4 inches below the general plane of the facade, or the stones replaced entirely. But again, that's a relatively small percentage of the wall. The stones in the field, which are rock face, some of them will need to be resurfaced a bit. In other words, there's some places where there's minor damage. Most of those stones are in reasonably good condition.
Thank you.
John, I also have a question. So the $10 million is what we expect to, you know, assuming that things don't get worse, that would include kind of facade repairs over perhaps a 10-year period. Does that also include like stained glass? I don't know.
No, I believe I was assuming that the stained glass varies in condition. Some of it is in reasonably good shape, some of it is not. I believe the 10 million includes temporary removal of the damaged stained glass and replacement with plexi as a temporary make-safe, and then that will have to be addressed in the future.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any other questions? Okay, thank you so much, Don. Okay. And finally, our last consultant is going to be Keith Brennan.
Commissioners, Keith has joined the hearing via Zoom. And Keith, you now have control of the presentation. If you just click on your screen. Go
Great.
ahead and click on your screen, Keith. And then you can advance the slides using your, please state your name for the record. You may begin.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Keith Brennan. I'm a Principal and Managing Director with Weitzman Associates. Weitzman is a real estate consulting firm that focuses on investment and development within real estate in New York City, throughout the U.S. and throughout the Americas. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Please feel free to interrupt with any questions or comments. I'll go through a PowerPoint presentation which effectively directly summarizes the report that has been submitted to the Commission. Happy to answer any and all questions at the end, and please feel free to interrupt as well. I will refrain from reading everything word from word on the document, but more speak to it from a big picture perspective. So we have been asked by the Commission to review the applicant's submission for the financial hardship claim, as well as all of the additional documents that have been submitted dating back from 2022 to the most recent documents submitted as of April 26th of just a week and a half ago. We have looked at focusing on the analyses and the determination of the relevance of the hardship claim itself and all of the inputs and assumptions that went into that claim. We've also looked to see if there was any additional market data to support comments and analyses that were prepared by the applicant, as well as comments and analyses that may have been prepared by the center. We also took a very hard look at the potential value creation and monetization of transfer development rights that do exist at the subject property, and what that impact was most recently with the City of Yes legislation, which expanded the potential sources for that. We focused primarily, again, on the hardship claim and the various scenarios that were proposed, both from a cost perspective as well as from a future occupancy, tenant, and revenue perspective from the rental side. We reviewed additional hearings and testimony from those hearings, and then really focused again on the hardship claim and that's relevance into the document itself. Again, the primary task here was to focus on the submission of the reasonable return analysis as it relates to the hardship claim from the landmark designation on the property. The appraisers and planners report was originally submitted back in 2022. The more recent submission was as of September 10th of 2025, and this document was our primary source of a review, along with a few other documents that we'll discuss that have been subsequently submitted to the Commission. The appraisers and planners looked at 5 redevelopment scenarios for the church: a base scenario where it would become a community facility, an infill scenario where there's additional space added into largely into the auditorium and sanctuary space so that there's more rentable revenue derived from more rentable square footage. And then 3 multifamily scenarios, one in which the church and the sanctuary space and the additional space are converted into a traditional multifamily market rent, a different scenario where it's multifamily with an affordable component associated with it, and then lastly, a condominium sellout of the residences on a for sale perspective. The focus of our analysis has really been whether appraisers and planners and the other submissions have properly accounted for the subject property as it currently exists and the potential revenue that could be derived from that scenario. We'll look at a few scenarios that have been presented by appraisers and planners, but we'll also comment on some additional analyses that have been also submitted into the Commission. And again, I quote on page 7 of appraisers and planners reports the process in which the reasonable return analysis is prepared and what that looks for. And again, it accounts for the potential rent that could be derived at the subject property as renovated and cured of its internal, structural, and exterior deficiencies. Appraisers and planners primarily focuses on a full renovation of the interiors along with the remediation work on the exterior to then determine what is the maximum rent that could be received by the property in its then current condition less operating expenses that would be standard for such an operation, which would yield our net operating income, and then determining whether that net operating income would yield a 6% return on the assessed value at that point in time. The hardship risk, excuse me, just one second. The hardship risk says that net annual return shall be the amount by which earned income yielded by the improvement parcel during the test year exceeds the operating expenses of such parcel during such year. And I focus largely on two words here, the earned income, or the revenue that would be received on an annualized basis. We look at that annualized revenue as not only is it a particular point in time or a particular year in which that is calculated, but the assumption of that earned income is that it is not a one-time event. It is an event that will occur on an annual basis on a going forward perspective from a real estate investment perspective. We do not believe that fundraising dollars or philanthropic charitable donations would constitute earned income from real estate as it relates to the calculation and determination of the hardship application. Appraisers and planners assumes a $55 per square foot rent for the space in both the base scenario and infill scenario, where community facility or other commercial use would be put into that church and the sanctuary and the adjoining building. They are assuming that the interiors would be improved up to standards that would attract the highest and best use from a tenant perspective, as well as would maximize the rent. If we were to assume that those interiors would not change, appraisers and planners makes the statement that market rent would be much lower, and we would agree with that comment as well. Overall, we agree with the operating expenses that they've utilized in this scenario. There's some opportunity to have a bit of a higher reserve and have a bit of a management fee increase over what's been proposed from a market perspective, but that would only further lead to a decrease in net operating income. We had worked alongside in 2023 with Cumming and Lara Cumming and the cost estimation firm to review the cost estimates that were prepared by the applicant. We're in general alignment with them in 2023, and we note that appraisers and planners has assumed inflation increases through 2025, and we deem those to be reasonable and in line with market. In the base scenario and in the infill scenario that are presented, largely as scenarios 1 and 2 in the appraisers and planners reports, no positive income was reached. Therefore, no reasonable return threshold was reached either, and that calculation was not necessary. In the multifamily scenario, we generally agree with the floor plans that were presented. We note that the ground floor had a significant amenity space. It's roughly 2,400 square feet. In our calculations, we included that as residential revenue, and that it would be prepared as we would not need that amount of amenity space for a building of this size. We believe the operating expenses that were presented by our appraisers and planners were realistic and reasonable on a per unit basis, on a per square foot basis, and as a percent of revenue basis. The multifamily scenario does provide some net operating income from a positive perspective, but that's prior to the deduction of real estate taxes, and it would not be sufficient to exceed the 6% threshold anyways. Appraisers and planners also looks into other opportunities, such as the use of historic tax credits. We agree with their assessment that given the census tract in which this property sits, they would not qualify for historic tax credits. And even if they did so, the impact to the net operating income and to the overall cost to renovate would not lead to a positive calculation above the 6% return threshold. We did find some additional lease comparables in the marketplace. Those are largely in support of that $55 per square foot as improved assumption that appraisers and planners used, and those are presented in Exhibit A of our Fuller report. Appraisers and planners in their most recent submission as of September 10th also comments on any monetary impact of the sale of TDRs or transfer development rights from the subject property to another property. Their conclusion is that that would be highly speculative and very uncertain. And while there is a market for TDRs, and we'll get into this here in a few slides, that it would be difficult to calculate at this time what that impact would be. One of the things, and this goes back to Mr. Friedman's presentation, since the initial submission in 2022 was a number of different analyses to look at if we were to spend, or I should say, excuse me, if the church were to spend the necessary money, what Mr. Friedman referred to as just less than $10 million on the facade, do no work to the interior of the building, leave it as is from both a floor plan perspective as well as an improvements perspective. What would the minimum rent be that the church would need to achieve, or the revenue that the church would need to achieve in order to exceed or meet the 6.0% return threshold for the financial hardship case? And that rent, assuming that there were no real estate taxes being paid by the church at that particular time, would be $37.58, or that number which is highlighted in yellow under the middle column. The column to the right shows the calculation of what that rent would need to be should the ownership of the church at that particular point in time be paying real estate taxes as a for-profit entity. And that rent would be $48.83. In our opinion, the existing space on an as-is basis today would rent for less than $25 per square foot. If a tenant would be found that would be willing to accept the existing code violations that were discussed a little bit earlier, as well as assuming that it would not impact a change of use. There are roughly 80 to 85,000 square feet of TDRs. I say roughly between 80 and 85,000 because there have been a variety of different calculations that are presented by the experts, but they all fall within that range. The challenge that we have here is initially back in 2022, FX Collaborative and the applicant found that there were 5 potential receiver sites. Following the legislation with the City of Yes and the changes as it relates to the TDRs, there are now upwards of 22 or 23 sites which could receive a portion of the 80 to 85,000 square feet of rights. However, while there are receiver sites, many of these sites are encumbered or would be very challenging in order to utilize those air rights, those additional TDRs, as well as come up with funding to acquire them. We have existing co-op buildings. We have rental buildings with rent-regulated tenants that are part of these. And we also have some smaller assemblages that are assumed by the center and some other submissions that we think are unrealistic at this time. We know appraisers and planners has opined on an option price, as they've qualified it, of roughly $1.5 million for the TDRs. The commission has asked us to take a look at what would be a potential sales process for those TDRs at market pricing, and how quickly could those occur for the revenue to reach the church. And on a net present value basis, that calculates out to about $5 million. That presentation and that calculation is presented in the exhibits of our report, but it assumes the sale of TDRs in chunks of 2,000 to 3,000 to 5,000 square feet at various points in time to a variety of those 23 or 22 receiving sites over 25 to 30 years, which we think is a reasonable time frame given the nature and the history of TDR sales in the marketplace, as well as the nature of the potential sites in which these TDRs could be acquired from. Again, we think it's a very lengthy and complicated process to go through the sale of the TDRs. And to this date, there hasn't been any existing pre-development activity on the receiver sites that would say that there is an immediate buyer for those sites. These TDRs are often acquired at a point in time in which the site is ready for development. The site has been acquired, and then once they have the ability to add on to their building to expand it either horizontally or vertically, with the addition of these TDRs, they then look to acquire them. We note that that ZR 7542, or the City of Yes, impact on the transfer of development rights has yet to really be truly measured in terms of what that impact is. But typically these TDRs are sold for larger development projects. They aren't typically sold for expansions and extensions of existing buildings. And while there is an increase in the number of receiver sites, TDRs and the transfer of TDRs is a very, very illiquid market. You are very supply constrained. There are still only certain buyers of the sites of these TDRs that could utilize them at their existing property. And so we do think that there is a lack of demand in the foreseeable or even the near to midterm for the transfer through multiple transactions and multiple properties of enough unused TDRs from West Park that would impact the financial hardship application or would impact positively the ability for the property to receive a return above the 6% threshold. Furthermore, it is unclear as to how any proceeds from this speculative analysis could be utilized in the determination of the financial hardship claim. These sales are one-off transactions. It could take a significant amount of time. There really is no secondary market to bank these TDRs. If someone were to bank them, as has been proposed, the receiver sites are still the same receiver sites. You would still have to market and sell to those 22 or 23 sites. And because of that, there are a limited and finite number of buyers. So it is not a typical market transaction. Excuse me. Seem to be stuck here. Give me 1 second. And I want to just some of the more recent documents that have come through so that we can, sorry, let me get back. All right. All right. A document that was presented by
Keith,
Oh.
Keith, is it possible, should we control the slides? Would it be easier for us to control the slides? I'm just asking.
we've got a few more, I think.
But you're skipping over some that you jumped from, I think, page 13. You're now at page 15.
No, I think we had ended here
Okay,
on
okay,
14.
sorry.
Yep. Yep, my apologies. I'm on international work travel and the internet seemed to be spotty, but I think we're back. Mr. Bankoff submitted a document that discusses a few things, and we wanted to bring it to the Commission's attention, particularly as we discuss the variety of reasonable return scenarios that have been presented. This document says that the expenses for repairs at West Park Church that were paid for by the center were roughly $48,000 per year from 2017 through 2025. This is important because this is a line item on the operating expenses that is both used by the applicant as well as other parties that have submitted documents. And it is far exceeds some of the expenses that have been more recently submitted by Leitner Berman as well as James Lima's organization. Furthermore, these expenses are likely to continue on a going forward basis, assuming that repairs of capitalized repairs aren't done or significant renovations aren't completed for the interiors of the space. These expenses that are presented above at $48,000 do not include insurance, pest control, or life safety expenses that would also be incurred. These were ones that were documented in the reports that were presented by the church and by the center. And most recently, the insurance expense has been $61,000 for the property, and the annual repairs and maintenance expenses have been $72,000 for the property. We note in Mr. Lima's document that there is a miscalculation or a misinterpretation of the depreciation allowance deduction. So in the reasonable return scenario, we are calculating what the total revenues would be in a given year. We're deducting the operating expenses that are associated with that property and with that operation. And then we are deducting 2% of the total cost for the renovation of the property, as well as 2% of the existing assessment of the improvements. So the real estate tax assessment for the property, with the removal of the land allocation of that assessment and only adding on the existing assessment for the improvements. In Mr. Lima's analysis, where he focuses on the $9.1 million from Mr. Friedman as the cost basis to renovate the property to make it suitable for use, that $9.1 million should be inflated to $2025, as was referred to previously by Mr. Friedman, and then 2% of that cost gets deducted from the net operating income. Mr. Friedman Mr. Lima is attaching that $9.1 million and only applying a portion of that assessment and adding that portion of the assessment to the existing land assessment. Rather, it would need to be 2% of the full $9.1 million. Mr. Lima, in some of his other scenarios in which he presents for, also accounts for additional tenant rent from repairs. They make the assumption that a tenant would lease the space for roughly $540,000, I believe is the number. And then on top of that, they would pay to the church $1.8 million per year to cover the cost of repairs, largely over a 6-year period. We don't see that occurring in the Manhattan marketplace, much less greater New York City or beyond. A tenant has a defined period of time in which they're allowed to use that space that they're leasing, 5, 7, 10 years. And after that, that space reverts back to control of the landlord or the owner, should they not renew the tenant. That $1.8 million for roughly 6 years would be paid in this scenario, directly paid by the tenant to cover those costs. At the end of that lease term, they would have no control or access. And so that's a highly unlikely scenario in which a tenant would fund, one, that magnitude of dollars, much less almost 3 times what they're already currently paying in rent. And again, these are these 4 scenarios that are presented at the end of their memorandum. Roughly $550,000 in annual rent for the church property on an as-is basis. That translates to roughly $30 on a net rentable basis, $25 and change on a gross basis. We think that is excessive in terms of what an existing tenant would pay for the space on an as-is condition. Furthermore, in one column, he does show a scenario in which he does not assume that the $1.8 to $1.9 million is spent on an annual basis by the tenant to the landlord as additional rent in order to cure the structural issues at the property. But he also miscalculates that depreciation allowance, as we previously spoke to. It should be 2% of the $9.1 million inflated to $2025 plus the current assessment of the improvements in place. There's another comment throughout the reports as well that have been submitted on behalf of the center, which focuses on profit sharing, which focuses on philanthropic fundraising, and we don't view that as it relates to the definition of earned income for the calculation of a financial hardship claim. Leitner Berman also submits a report most recently as of April 2026. They have a similar issue in terms of their calculation about what the annual amortization of the depreciation allowance should be, utilizing a number just under $60,000 when the proper deduction should be $240,000. We also note that they state that this property was specifically designed for a not-for-profit use. It's our opinion that it was designed for a religious use, and the space could be easily adapted to another use that could be either for-profit or not-for-profit. Again, from a commercial perspective, from a retail perspective, from a residential perspective, or from a community facility perspective as well on the non-for-profit side. Also within the Leitner Berman report, again, we talk about their miscalculation of the then in place assessment. And we also comment on the fact that they claim a realization of sales of TDRs that are imminent. These TDR processes take a very long period of time. There's some examples of it being 5, 10, 15, 20 years from existing negotiations between a willing buyer and a willing seller. The fact here is we don't have willing buyers of the TDRs in the near term. One other comment from the Leitner-Berman submission on April 26th is that they bring up the premise that if a tenant were willing to fund the required renovations. And again, this goes back to the fact that there are no tenants in the marketplace that would be willing to fund the magnitude of capital in the near term, as noted in Mr. Friedman's analysis, and then be subject to a lease expiration, whether that be 5, 10, or even 20 years from the point in time in which the financial hardship claim is calculated. We do note, and we want to make sure to clarify that while the center has said that they would be able to fund that, the center is not a typical market tenant, and we need to kind of understand that as we do the analysis for the financial hardship claim. Urban Factors also submitted a document on April 26th as it relates to prior testimony and prior submissions from the applicant. And again, this goes back to the uncertainty and the unlikelihood of relying on the transfer of TDRs to accommodate a financial hardship claim. And this is largely related to the Stahl matter, in which it stated that realized only 10 years after the Stahl decision, the TDR transfer opportunity turned out to be not so speculative after all. It is one example, but that 10-year time period is something that we are focused on and accounting for because there is no certainty in which any transaction would occur. We have presented in the exhibit of our report a summary of all of the TDR sales in New York City that have occurred from the beginning of 2023 through year to date of 2026. There has been an increase in those sales, in the velocity of those sales. But when we talk about the velocity, we're talking about 3 to 5 sales per year, increasing to 6 to 7 to 8 sales per year. So it's not as if the floodgates have opened up from the City of Yes legislation. There is a wider marketplace, but it is still a very illiquid market. And so based on the review of the submitted materials and our expertise in focusing on underwriting development, redevelopment opportunities in Manhattan and throughout the boroughs, it's our opinion that the calculations that are presented by the applicant for the reasonable return analysis are reasonable, are market supported, and are based on underwriting standards that are present in the market as of the data submission. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, did you have questions?
Yeah, thanks for that presentation. Couple of questions. Talking about the development scenarios, did you evaluate them or kind of review them and determine that that their assumptions were legit and that their conclusions were that you agree with their conclusions?
From appraisers and planners?
Yeah.
Yes.
And from FX Collaborative. So in the case of the rental or condo, were the costs associated with building a rental or condo tower above this building? So why was that deal unprofitable when it seems that there are other deals of that nature that are going on in Manhattan that are profitable? What about this particular deal made it such a bad one?
I think we were looking at what is the existing envelope of the building as it currently exists, and what are the floor plans of the residential layouts that could fit within the building as it exists, and the cost to complete the work in order to convert the existing facility into a residential space. The costs are very significant.
My recollection, though, is that FX also produced a couple of versions where they did towers built on top of the church, as well as renovating the church's space itself. You didn't.
There were some analyses that FX prepared to show where there could be a cantilevered building or a sliver building, correct? Appraisers and planners focuses on the scenarios in which the existing square footage is converted to residential.
So you didn't review those sliver tower options?
Correct.
So you noted that the center's offer of rent plus money to renovate was atypical. Should that invalidate that offer? How would you recommend that we consider that information?
I think you should consider the information in terms of a few approaches. The reasonable return analysis focuses on the market and not a specific tenant. I think the other question would be is how readily available are those funds that the center, if they were to present that and fund that, those funds would need to be immediate as it relates to determining, and again, this is focusing on our analysis of the financial hardship claim and the methodology that needs to be viewed to either support that claim or not. And so our analysis is focused on what would a typical market tenant pay under the various scenarios, commercial or residential or community facility or otherwise, and whether or not that return threshold is met. We do not see situations in Manhattan where tenants are paying for significant improvements to structures that they don't get a long-term benefit from or an ownership from.
Thank you.
And if I can just jump in, I don't. And maybe Keith, just to maybe go into that a little bit more in detail too. As you've testified, in your view, the reasonable return analysis is an analysis that has a test year, but that test year is presumed to speak to earned income over time. And the question would be the offers to pay to do various things or profit sharing or whatever, those are hard to take into account as earned income because they are inherently unknown and not something you can predict into the future.
You can't
Is that
predict.
correct?
There are one-time events potentially or scattered over time. And what we're trying to look for in a test year is what is the maximized earned income that could be achieved. And that earned income would be rental revenue in a real estate construct. That would be the reimbursement of operating expenses, depending on how the lease was structured. It would not be one-time donations, philanthropic contributions, or payments that wouldn't be categorized as rental revenue.
Thank you. I also have some questions. You initially started off with a couple different scenarios. The first one being the community facility scenario, and then going into multifamily scenarios. None of them, I think, met the 6% return threshold. However, you had said that the multifamily scenarios threw off a positive cash flow. Can you tell us which scenarios were the most profitable?
Right. So the residential rental scenario does throw off positive cash flow, positive net operating income. The amount of net operating income that is generated, however, does not meet the 6% return threshold.
Thank you. So I guess there would, I guess I'm speculating here, but would there be a scenario where you could create enough multifamily units that we could pass the 6% threshold?
We don't believe so, no.
And can you elaborate on why?
We've looked at the floor plans that were presented for the building on the residential perspective. They are appropriately designed. They're appropriately small to maximize the rent per square foot, as well as maximize the rent per month that would be achieved. And we understand that with the deduction of the cost that it would take, which is roughly $70 million in the multifamily scenario, I believe. When we take that net operating income and we remove, or we deduct, I should say, the 2% of the current building's assessment and the 2% of the cost to renovate and reposition the building, there is not enough cash flow to make a 6% return threshold.
Thank you. I have another question on the TDRs. You had said that there probably is not an immediate market for TDRs to make it meaningful. However, you did give us a number of $5 million for possible, I guess it was an option assessment, net present value. Can you explain that?
Yes. So what we've done is we have taken an allotment of the 80 to 85,000 square feet of TDRs that are held by the church. We have sold them off over time under the hypothetical assumption that of those 22 to 23 receiver sites, they would buy them at various stages over time. We've allocated what I believe is a $200 per square foot value to those, increasing over the next 30 years. And that sale of those TDRs occurs in a number of different transactions over the next 30 years. The $5 million represents the net present value, or the discount of all of those transactions over the next 30 years back to today. So what would be the hypothetical value that we would assign to those transfer development rights to the church as of the year in which the hardship claim? Again, the church would be selling those over time. There is not one buyer that will be acquiring the 80,000 square feet.
But given that you said that there's no secondary market, isn't this just an exercise?
It is an exercise. As stated previously, this was an exercise to say what value could be applied into a hypothetical scenario where you would have a willing seller of these TDRs.
But we wouldn't be able to realize that financial amount right now.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, other questions? Commissioner Wilder?
Yeah, question about following up on the TDR discussion. Can you talk a little bit more about why does a receiver site, or what do you see as a receiver site that is deemed as qualified? And also, based on your expertise for this specific project, what would be an ideal receiver site?
Right. So our analysis of the receiver sites was largely based on FX Collaborative's analysis that was presented on behalf of the applicant, as well as other analyses that have been presented largely on behalf of the center. There is a common understanding about what those 22 or 23 sites are. I say 22 or 23 because there is a little bit of a change. So assuming that there are a full 23 acceptable receiving sites that would qualify to be able to receive the air rights from the church property. We also looked at the nature of some of those. They have rent regulated tenants in many of the apartment buildings that are part of that 23. We have buildings that are co-op buildings that operate under different ownership structures that are part of those 23 sites. And we do a detailed analysis of this in our report just to pinpoint each particular site. An ideal receiver for the air rights would be a single-story, two-story building that would look to be redeveloped for commercial or residential use as its highest and best use. It would be a surface parking lot. It would be a shovel-ready development site. None of those 23 sites that are eligible to receive the TDRs from the church would be viewed as a imminent development site.
Are there any of the sites that could be demolished and kind of imagined as a new building?
Potentially, yes. There's also a collection of townhouse sites that are adjacent to one another that could be assembled. They're under separate ownership now, but they could be assembled, demolished, and then could utilize those TDRs. The timing of which, though, is unknown.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
Are any of those potential receiving sites in a landmark district?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
No, actually, I'll just correct that there are a handful of sites that were offered as rooftop addition sites and rear yard addition sites that were in the district, but there were just a handful of those.
And we do document that, sorry, just to say in the exhibits of our report, the specific documentation of that is presented. I just don't know which ones off the top of my head.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much, Keith. Shall we move to the next?
So commissioners, if there's additional information that you would like me to reach out and try to get, please communicate that with me. And I will be circulating a memo shortly that also talks about the third factor in this test, and we can move forward from there.
Thanks. Let's move to the next item.
Right, we'll now be continuing with our public meeting agenda. Next will be public meeting item number 2, LPC 26-06719, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1204, Lot 7, 61 West 90th Street in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. This is a Queen Anne and Romanesque Revival style row house designed by William F. Burroughs and built in 1885 to 86. And the application is to modify the stoop and basement level entrance. This was read into the record at the public hearing of April 7th, 2026. However, it was not presented and no testimony was taken at that time, so we'll do that today after we open the hearing.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to open the hearing?
Moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that?
No second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearings are open. You may begin.
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for having us. I'm Michael Chen. I'm principal of Michael Kitchen Architecture. Here representing the owners of 61 West 90th Street, as well as the Trust for Architectural Easements, who hold the rights to the historic easement on the facade. Building is located in the Central Park West Historic District, between Columbus and Central Park West. Here it is in context. And in 1940, an original condition of the building, as well as the condition at designation. You'll see that at the time of designation, some rather peculiar changes had been made to the building, including the addition of a single car garage at the basement level, the partial demolition of the stoop, and the creation of a new basement entry facing the street. These are those conditions today. So you can see that the stair of the original stoop was removed, leaving only the kind of portion of the original cheek walls. There's no original brownstone material remaining. This is all stucco. The original newel posts of the stair had been kind of resurfaced in something rather reduced. And there's a new primary entrance, basement level entry, door with a new ornamental grille that recalls some of the historic ironwork of the building, was not exactly matching it, as well as the one car garage. So this is the proposed scope of work on the right, kind of comparative rendering of the existing condition on the left. We're proposing to remove a portion of the extant cheek walls and to restore the newel posts to a geometry that's much closer to the original condition, and to repurpose the original elements of the ironwork that remain into a new railing, kind of running along retaining walls that will lead to a vestibule entrance. Just for context, part of the kind of impetus for this is in part to kind of to address this rather peculiar condition at at the street, but also to bring the building into greater harmony with its surrounding neighbors, all of whom have basement level entries with kind of low retaining walls and ironwork flanking them. And so just to kind of go into a bit more detail into the proposal, this is the portion of the cheek wall that we're proposing to remove on either side of the railing. You can see that it's entirely a stucco construction. And then a model from further down on the block for a geometry of the newel that we'd like to kind of emulate. We're proposing to kind of keep the existing sidewalk gate that was already there and was there at the time of designation, but simply resurface the newel. And this is just a detail of the small portion of existing ornamental ironwork that remains on the building. It's a kind of like squiggle picket geometry that is the predominant language of ornamental metal on the block. We're proposing to kind of reutilize these elements in the new building. Just kind of comparison. So kind of the portion of cheek wall that is to remain is to be removed is dashed, and the plan of the new areaway entrance is down below. You'll see that we're proposing to kind of separate the gate from the door, recess the door a few feet into the building to create an entrance vestibule. And then no changes at the existing parlor level. Again, a kind of comparison, the existing condition on the left and the proposed on the right, and I'll sort of zoom in to the proposed geometry here. So you can see that we're proposing to kind of re-articulate the brownstone rules on the street, retain the gate, and the new sort of ornamental grille or kind of gate that is at the vestibule is an open air gate that creates a kind of like a buffer zone at the street level. And again, just an enlarged plan of the proposal. We're also working with the staff to rework the sidewalk stair down to the basement level to bring it into conformance with kind of the correct proportions of the stair for egress. And I'll be working a lot of the subsurface drainage out here, which is pretty badly degraded. And then again, a kind of detailed series of sections through the existing condition and the proposed. And then sections through that entrance. As you can see that the recession of the front door, just to kind of repeat the new open air entry gate, and then new stucco piers flanking the entrance on either side with a chamfered detail that recalls the kind of chamfered corners of the rest of the building. Those are the items. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, so Michael, you can't do the traditional come around under that condition because the garage is there and you can't get down low enough on the side. So you need to, a lot of the other houses obviously have lost their stoops completely. What you're proposing is just essentially keeping those two pieces on the street edge to recall the remnant of a stoop that was there.
Right.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Is there anybody in the room who would like to speak on this item? Noting that there isn't, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Thompson to see if we have any remote testimony.
Those joining via Zoom who wish to speak, please raise your hand. The first speaker will be Megan Fitzpatrick. You'll be promoted to panelist, after which we ask you to unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Commissioners. Megan Fitzpatrick speaking on behalf of Landmark West. Our Certificate of Appropriateness Committee questions why the applicant seeks to remove more original material. The building currently retains remnants of a former stoop entrance. This kind of feature serves as a visual trace of history in the streetscape. Preserving such features allows the public realm to reflect layered narratives of the past. The removal would diminish that opportunity. We therefore urge the applicant to retain these elements and to consider restoring the original stoop. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else on Zoom wishing to speak? Right, seeing no raised hands, I'll note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 7 recommends approval.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to the comments?
What I would say is that there is no original material really being proposed to be removed. The original brownstone is gone. It's so we're dealing with kind of stucco condition. The extent of modification of the ground floor of this building is extensive. And so I think to kind of bring a really just a kind of bizarre condition into greater harmony with the surrounding context is a suitable approach to kind of this historic material.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? If not, let's go ahead and close the hearing. Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Mahan, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearings are closed. Let's go ahead and start the discussion. Commissioner Wilder, would you like to start this discussion?
Thank you for the presentation. I think the work that's being proposed is it's taking away the form of the former stoop that used to be there and creating more of a, I guess, traditional entrance at this basement level. From what I understand, there's not much more that's being changed, so we're really focusing on the alterations that are made at this level. I don't see an issue with the changes that are being proposed. I think the newer post is fine to be restored to how it used to look. And so we're really just focusing on these cheek walls that are being removed and the railings that are retaining the existing design or actual railings and being repurposed. So overall, I can find it appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Kumbe?
Overall, I believe it's an acceptable solution for, yes, even at designation, a odd condition. I'm okay with the removing of portions of the cheek wall, redefining new wall posts, leaving the existing gate in place. I find it appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Yes, I'm in agreement. I think this is appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
As the applicant said, a suitable approach. Appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree.
Commissioner Chen? Commissioner Mahan? Okay. Commissioner Wilder, would you like to read the motion?
Sure. In the matter of LPC -26-06719, 61 West 90th Street, Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District, a Queen Anne Romanesque Revival Style row house designed by William F. Burroughs and built in 1885 to 1886. Application is to modify the stoop and basement level entrance. I note that the building scale, style, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the historic stoop and entrance have been highly altered and cannot be restored to their historic configuration without extensive exterior and interior modifications. That the house is located between two houses which no longer retain their stoops. Therefore, the removal of sections of the historic stoop wall remnants and metal railings at this row house will not diminish the unity of the row. That the proposed composition, including a shallow balcony at the former parlor floor entrance, will be in keeping with typical early 20th century alterations sometimes found at houses of this style and age, while supporting the historic wow, why is this word killing me right now? Hierarchical organization of the facade. Threw that in there. That the integration of sections of the historic metal railings and the lower sections of the brownstone stoop walls into the redesign will retain portions of the historic fabric and recall the presence and footprint of the historic stoop. That the proposed basement level entrance gate will recall the gates historically found at basement entrances of houses of this age and style in terms of its placement, material, finish, and details. That the newel posts will be resurfaced and resculpted to closely replicate the historic posts in terms of overall design and silhouette. That the brownstone tinted stucco steps and bluestone paving at the basement entrance will be in keeping with areaway paving and steps throughout the historic district, and that the work will not detract from special architectural and historic character of the building, streetscape, and historic district.
Thank you. Commissioner Kumbay, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg, Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quimby.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Mann.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and unopposed, the motion passes.
That's been approved. Let's move to the next item.
Next item is public meeting item number 3, LPC 25-07016, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 474, Lot 19, 41 and 43 Mercer Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is a store and storehouse building, that's number 43, designed by Henry Fernbach and built in 1868, and a one-story garage, that's number 41. The application is to demolish the garage, number 41, and construct a new building, to remove the party wall and combine the buildings and replace storefront infill and construct rooftop and rear yard additions at building number 43. This was last presented at the public hearing of February 24th, 2026. No action was taken at that time. The applicants will present revisions to the proposal in response to your comments after we open the proceedings.
Commissioner Wilder, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Kumbay, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the proceedings are open. You may begin.
Thank you. Hello, Commissioners and Landmark staff. Thank you for hearing this application this morning. My name is Jackie Pudu-Vallon, JPD Preservation Consulting. I'm here today with the architect, Alexander Naratoff. I'm going to repeat everything that Corey just said. Commissioners last saw this application on the 24th of February. The project is a proposal to demolish an existing one-story garage and to construct a new building at 41 Mercer. And at 43 Mercer, additions and storefront alterations are proposed at the existing building. These buildings are to be combined at the interior. At the public hearing, a couple commissioners were not present, so we will briefly review some of the background information on the proposal, in addition to discussing the changes that were made in response to your comments. Here are renders of the design showed in February and the current proposal for the front and rear facades. At the proposed new building on the left, commissioners asked that the floor heights, as expressed by the window openings, be restudied and that the second floor balcony be removed or replaced, and that a pigeon protection system be added to the details. At 43 Mercer, the existing building on the right, commissioners asked that the details of the atelier window at the 5th floor be refined, that the setback portion of the addition be reduced in height and simplified, and that additional details be included at the storefront. And at the rear of 43 Mercer, commissioners asked that the cladding of the addition and its fenestration pattern be restudied, to better relate to the front facade and to the district overall. Here are the building elevation drawings showing the previous proposal on the left and the current on the right. In elevation, you can see the changes that have been made to the setback portions of the addition at 43. We took your comments to heart about paring down the design and the massing. As Commissioner Goldblum stated, we needed to make it look like something that you don't see, something that's in the roofscape but doesn't draw attention to itself. And so we incorporated as much glass as possible and sort of framed it in standing seam metal, which is typical of utilitarian structures on roofs. The bulkhead has been removed from the top of the addition and more transparency has been incorporated. Just to refresh your memory, here are the two buildings in their current condition. 41 Mercer is currently an unadorned one-story garage that we're seeking to demolish. And 43 Mercer on the right was originally a 2.5-story federal house on a raised basement. It originally had a pitched roof, so the third floor was expanded and a full fourth floor was added. It was also extended to almost the rear lot line that happened in the 1860s, which was consistent with when this neighborhood changed from residential to manufacturing. And you saw a transition from houses to loft buildings. These buildings stand on the west side of the street between Grand and Broome. The photos on the right show the buildings that are across the street to the east. In the foreground is the famous Jean Nouvel Tower that extends from Mercer to Broadway along Grand Street. You'll note a gap in the street wall between that glass tower and the brick lot line wall of the neighboring building. That gap in the street wall is opposite 43 Mercer and creates a narrow corridor from Broadway, a view corridor from Broadway. Here in this aerial view, you can see that view corridor. This view corridor will allow for visibility of the rooftop addition at 43, although from a great distance and obviously 1 block away. Here's the current view seen from Broadway through this sort of alley with a glass wall in front of it. You can see the red brick of 43 Mercer and the massing of the rears of the buildings on Green Street behind it, which sort of appear to hover over it. So while 43 Mercer is visible from Broadway, so too is the volume of the rear of 42 Green behind it. And with that, I'd like to introduce the architect, Alexander Neratov, to take you through the design revisions.
Good morning, Commissioners and Landmarks staff. I'm Alexander Neratov, the architect for this project. We presented 41 Mercer's facade design, sources and methodology at the February public hearing, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. The first of the 3 directions set by the commissioners at the February public hearing was to address the unequal floor heights. So we modified the facade of 41 Mercer to equalize floors 3, 4, and 5, leaving the 2nd floor and the 6th floor taller. In Soho, 2nd floors are almost always taller than other floors. The middle floors here are equal, B, and the 2nd floor and the top floor are equal and both taller. And the reason for that is that contrary to the expectation, Soho cast iron facades, the top floors are often unique. They're either taller, detailed differently with unique penetration, taller windows. I counted that on a quick walkthrough, 16 of such unique facades just within the central district of Mercer, Green, and Worcester Street. And most of them are original. The details are consistent. They're not actually additions. So based on that, we kept the top floor taller and kept both 2nd floor and the top floor have an extra panel, a transit panel. Some examples of recent commission approvals of buildings with equal height upper floors. And our building next to that. I think it's consistent now. The inequality of the 4th floor was now eliminated. The second direction the commissioners gave is to eliminate the second floor balcony, which we did, and we replaced it with very shallow sort of French balconies at the second floor. That is actually typical of the southeast part of Soho, where second floor buildings, particularly on Broome and Mercer Street, have balustrades at a second floor. It's not typical of, let's say, Northern Soho. So we use that detail to justify these shallow balconies. And, also, we used a Mercer Street original detail occurs 3 times up to speed on Mercer Street, where the iron grill work of both fire escapes and railings have like a zigzag line alternating with a straight line. So that's the profile we use at the second floor balcony. Third concern commissioners expressed was bird proofing, even though Soho actually does not have, surprisingly, many pigeons. I lived there, they're very few, but it could. So we looked at electric strips, we looked at gel packs, all of which turns out do long-term damage to metalwork of the facade. So we found a slightly recessed grid, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, in stainless or stainless with a vinyl coating so it becomes dark, and slightly recessed, not going to be visible hardly at all, similar to the nylon netting that's occurs over carved stone facades elsewhere. And so the effect of this, on the 41 Mercer side, that's how it looks in rendering. On the 43 side, which we'll get into, this is also all you see from the street. None of the addition above 43 Mercer is visible from Mercer Street, except along that view corridor. So regarding 43 Mercer, the first direction set by the commissioners was to refine the atelier window details to be simpler and more industrial, to reduce and simplify the rooftop addition. We made the atelier glazing pattern taller and narrower, extending it all the way up. We eliminated the upper level of the addition by removing the stair and elevator bulkheads, the outdoor kitchen. We pushed back the pool, all of which was a fairly difficult change because the functions were either lost or had to be pushed into the 41 penthouse side. 43 Mercer started as was described earlier as a federal house. The first edition, which is the middle slide, more than doubled the volume of the building, replaced the facade. So there's really nothing except there's some minor traces left of the federal house. And it filled in the ground floor, extended all the way into the yard over the years. And our enlargement is far smaller by comparison with the original one. And we are keeping the facade. We styled the atelier window of the 5th floor, however, to make it appear to have been part of an early 20th century enlargement, imitating 550 Broadway, which is the slide on the right, an atelier addition that's rare in Soho, but typical of the adjacent Greenwich Village and East Village, thus leaving the impression to the casual observer that the building is a 5-story structure with a relatively much smaller modern enlargement above. So that's a section in the original presentation of with the addition fairly substantial with masonry and more details calling too much attention to itself. And so we replaced the atelier glazing to go all the way up to the top of the slanted opening. And gave it more window space. So it looks more like a late 19th, early 20th century greenhouse structure. We lightened the details, the 2 upper floors, are really a face for a two-story living room. So even though it looks like two floors, it's really like a floor and a skylight. You see in a section, there's a vertical space behind it. You know, keep in mind that everything above the atelier window is seen 270 feet away, 75 feet lower than this, and it's viewed through a glass wall and 8 trees. So there's really very, very little that you can understand from this, the only distance that you could see this. On the plan, the top floor is the old former version. So we removed the stair bulkhead, elevator bulkhead, outdoor kitchen, pergola, mechanical equipment. We pushed in a new version, pushed the pool back so at a, even the observed at this distance from 270 feet away, you do not see that pool. The atelier window changed the proportion of what would be seen as an early 20th century volume while simultaneously lightening it and reducing the relative size and complexity of the upper 1.5 effectively floors. No one will see this view except from a drone with the guidance. But anyhow, you see the proportion, relative proportion will change. Prominent additions we looked at recently, approved in Soho, on the left 55 Mercer, which is a standing metal seam, very utilitarian looking. Others are glass and metal again. Two of them, 142 Green and 61 Crosby, are very, very visible and approved by the commission. Some more approved additions up the street, 113, 115 Mercer, 2-story plus 38 Green, 2-story addition, which actually served also as the backdrop for 43 Mercer's addition. 43 Mercer is never seen against the sky. It's always seen at that distance because of the angle. It's always seen against taller buildings behind it. So at that distance, you cannot tell whether it's on top of 43 Mercer or whether it's on a building in Green Street. A 2-story addition to a 3-story building right up the street, 53 Mercer, in its original form above approved and below the final approval as built. Slanted glass, very modern feeling, like the skylight. That's I think our main inspiration for the addition on 43 Mercer. And I can tell you, 53 Mercer, you cannot see that from the street. So the addition became lighter. All the masonry on top of it is gone. The variety is gone. It's one simple set of details, minimal and just glazing and standing seam metal. Rear facade, a major change here. Fenestration to look more traditional. It's now brick, going all the way up to the penthouse. The back wall of 41 Mercer, which is the strip on the right, that's also now brick all the way to the top practically. The very, very top, we switched to standing seam metal to avoid the outside corner, meeting two materials in the outside corner. So a much lightened look, but it looks more traditional. The storefront. So one of the recommendations commissioners made was the addition of the bulkhead. Some other comments were about getting rid of the side lights on the original doors and simplifying and filling up the gap above the store name. And underneath the cast iron arch lintel, which we think is there, you see a little evidence of it, but it's been filled in the 40 by some brick. So we extended the columns vertically up, extended the front portion up. We pushed the pilasters to the side a little more, and now we have single doors in the two openings. much simpler. And same view, but in a rendered form before and after. Sorry. And so the renderings before and after, again, with these views are all you see from Mercer Street. The affiliate window is much lighter now and really much more similar to 550 Broadway. Or it's the same thing viewed from a little bit to the south. And the view down the view corridor, which was really an aberration in Soho. Soho was supposed to have a continuity of streetscape. But as you see, the winter, when you see anything, and you really can't tell whether that the addition that we're proposing, that it's on top of our building or whether it's somewhere behind on Green Street, and it's behind, it's backed up by 38 Green, 42 Green. And that is what it looks like in fully depicted form. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Mahan?
Thank you for the presentation. Can you please describe the rationale and design logic behind the various rooftop penthouses, I guess you could call them, at 41? It's a new building, but there are a variety of complex looking accretions on the rooftop, perhaps.
Well, for zoning reasons and also for proportion of facade reasons, we have to set back the 7th floor level. So it's a two-story penthouse. It's clad to the same material. The upper one is set back because it has to be much smaller, because it needs to be less than a third of the roof square footage. So it's set back a little further than the 7th floor. Actually, you know, it's relatively kind of simple. There also, the fire department had some requirements, and we also needed to put some we needed space for the mechanical equipment. We lost the bulkhead on the 43 side, pushed it everything into 41, so we had a smaller footprint to work with for mechanical equipment. At an angle, again from the street, it's really not visible. So it's prominent here, but you know, if you look at and we did a study of Google satellite study of Soho, and every second building, if not 2 out of 3, have additions that are enormous. Soho being what it is, narrow streets, you know, continuous streetscape, it is unusual that all the additions on top are not visible on the street. So following that pattern, what we propose, I think it's fairly delicate compared to what else is up there.
Thank you. You mentioned actually the rooftop mechanical equipment. Does that not need to be screened by current zoning?
We don't think so. I mean, there's screened partly. There's a glass railing around the perimeter, so I don't think it needs to be screened to the full height.
Okay. One more question. At the public hearing, I remember your presentation clearly. It was very interesting with all the various references to art and artists in the neighborhood. There was some discussion about the profile and the detailing, the design, the opaque versus transparent character of the pilasters in the 41 building. Have there been any revisions or refinements to that element?
No, we maintained that portion. Again, transparency is something that somehow associated with a more modern view, and you know, our encrypted classical version is really the fin.
Right.
So theoretically, everything except the fin is modern. You know, and that's really, you know, we don't take credit for that. Maybe take credit for identifying it, but really Soho, in historically, in its evolution from imitative work to a more modern version of itself. Later Soho buildings use the pilaster as an encrypted form of classicism on a budget. So we based our idea on this sort of more modern view of late Soho architecture versus early Soho.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Jefferson?
I understand the penthouse on the roof, but I'm a bit concerned about the scale of it. And my computer's not working right. What's the scale floor to floor of each of those penthouses? You have a drawing?
Yeah, early on there's a section. These are, you know, 9-foot ceiling spaces. They're not unusual. I mean, the whole building has fairly tall floors on the second floor and the 6th floor, but the middle floors are not that tall. So it's consistent that there's nothing outlandishly tall there.
So you're saying to me that the penthouse floors are 9 feet floor to floor, or 9 feet?
The 9-foot ceiling heights. There's 9 foot, I think, on the 7th and 8th on the penthouse.
Thank you very much.
And Commissioner Jefferson, were you asking about at the new building or at the historic building that's having
No, I'm
3
talking,
penthouse
I'm
floors added
talking
to it?
about the
existing-
Mercer Street,
The new building?
the new building.
Thank you.
I have a question too. On 43 Mercer, you noted that there's 2-story addition, and yet you said perhaps that the living room was double height,
Yeah.
or so would it be a 3-story addition, or?
Well, it's the 5th floor. It's an addition, yes, but I'm considering it sort of visually part of the historic fabric. So it's really a 2-story addition on top of that, technically speaking, the 3-story addition. The upper 2 floors, however, are a 2-story living room with a little mezzanine bedroom behind. So even though it's broken up into a straight glass section and then a slanted glass section, behind it is a 2-story living room. So it is, and because the upper floor is slanted, it really is a skylight. You know, it looks like a skylight and functions as a skylight to a 2-story space.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
You're essentially not adding floors, you're creating spaces, larger spaces within the so-called addition. Am I reading that right?
On 43, well, that's all new, yes. But everything
no,
above the red is new.
If you have a floor and then the space becomes double on the inside, you're creating a new space inside, correct?
Well, that is new space, yes, but it's a tall new space. This is where the grand stairway to the upper floor is. And then you see on the rear portion of that is a bedroom that's kind of
So you, just trying to imagine this is a mansion, really.
yes.
It's not just a floor added that's subdivided. You're adding a mansion of spaces.
Yes, we are.
Each other.
This is new space.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mahan, and then Commissioner Chu.
At the public hearing, I was recalling there was a rather complex arrangement on the front facade of 41 of window operability. Some sashes went up, some sashes went down, some other things like that. I don't quite recall exactly. Has there been any refinement or changes to that?
Yes, it's simplified. So
Okay.
3, 4, and 5 are really double hung windows. They're
Okay.
unequal height sash, but they're double hung windows. It so happens that the 4th floor one can actually move up instead of moving down. On the other 2, the upper sash moves down. But that's a characteristic of double hung windows, traditional or new ones.
They're still not consistent operation.
No, but it's not visible. They look exactly the same.
Wouldn't it be visible in the open condition?
The open condition, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I missed this on the first public hearing, but I did just have a question on 43. We're keeping the existing building facade and structure. I'm just trying to understand the exact scope.
The 43's facade is being kept. All the exterior walls of 43 are being kept.
Okay.
The new structure is independent of the old building. It's on the inside. It touches, but does not.
You needle through the
Yeah,
existing and you self-support the addition, which is one, I guess.
It varies.
Yeah, I don't know how many floors
Three
to
and
call
4
this, but
floors.
if I consider the top 2 floors, it's 3.5 floors.
Sort of, because the back of the building, the existing building is 3 stories in the back, 4 stories in the front.
Correct.
So we're filling all that in with a totally self-supporting new structure. That's not touching the existing one.
Okay, and then in plan, I didn't see a plan. Are the 2 lots linked or are they separate units?
They're linked.
41 and 43.
Yeah, the south wall of 43 right now is in very poor condition.
Okay.
We are replacing it, but we are replacing it with a poured concrete wall that happens to be our shear wall in the building. So the description in the application reads that we're removing that wall. We're removing and replacing that wall with a solid concrete wall. So the wall that's between the 2 buildings, that's next to the elevator, that's from the elevator runs towards the street. That's a new, very thick concrete wall.
The party wall.
It's a party. It wasn't never a party wall. It's actually a double wall always.
Right.
It's now becoming a very thick concrete wall that replaces the existing brick
Bearing
south
wall.
of 43, and therefore it maintains the rigidity of the 43 Mercer facade.
Mhm.
So it stays independent and self-supporting, and the structure bypasses all the historic fabric of 43.
Okay, so the units actually connect through.
Yes.
Okay.
They go all the way through.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's go ahead and we can start our discussion. Let's go ahead and start our discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this discussion?
Sure. It remains an interesting application. I think that it's generally appropriate. I think that the improvements to the storefront on the right side building are good, simplified, more distinct from the left side building. I think that the argument about regularizing the floors works except for on the top floor. The examples shown of other buildings that had taller top floors had top floors that had a very distinctly different design to them, arched or smaller proportions, or bigger. There was something very, very different about them. This particular design is drawing on a much different strand of the Soho universe, where I think that top floor just looks odd because its design is the same as the lower floors, but the proportions just kind of go in a different direction. So I think given that design is the same more or less as the lower floors, I think that the height should be the same as the lower floors as well. I think that the rear facade of the right side building is much improved and is appropriate as is. I think that the north light design is improved as well. And my only suggestion, happy to hear what others say is, I think that the tip-top floor of the right side building, which is that double height space, could be pushed back further. I mean, I think that our general policy has been to try to keep rooftop additions to the minimum, and it seems like for a grand stair double height thing, it probably could be reduced without harming anybody, and it would just be more in keeping with other approvals.
Are you saying, so reduce the height of the,
I'm not saying reduce the height of it. I think reduce the footprint of it, push it back further. And if it could be lowered, that'd be a good thing too. But I was more concerned about the plan dimension of it. And there's like, the way it shows in the section is that there's like an angled window, then there's like 3 feet of floor, then there's a hole where it's a double height over a stair, and then there's a bedroom in the back. So if you were to push that glass wall back where it's somewhere over the stair, still keeping your bedroom, but you're yet reducing the visibility a little bit, you're reducing the bulk a little bit. I think it just keeps it be more proportional, even though the visibility is limited.
Sorry, Michael, I didn't hear the first comment about 41. You're talking 41 first.
I'm sorry, which
41 is the left one.
Left.
I
was
think.
saying that the left one looks fine to me with the exception of the top floor. The top, he showed a diagram where if you go from two to the top, it's A, B, 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 A, right? And I'm saying that the top A looks weird. The examples that he showed of why that's okay were examples where the top floor, let's say, was half the width. The windows were half the width. They were arched. They were somehow very, very different. And this is taking a much more modular approach where the floors are basically all the same. So for those examples, I just didn't think that the precedents were relevant. And so the peculiarity of that extra stretched top floor to me isn't warranted by the precedents.
okay, I think that the second floor also is oversized, but that one is okay with you?
And I think that that's, in my experience, also normative. So I think that that's okay.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Commissioner Jefferson?
I mostly agree, except that the top floor, I think, I agree that the proportion of that is just odd, but I'm not sure even reducing it is going to make it any better. The second floor, it's also odd to me. There's something about this repetition and proportion that seems so modern in thinking that, and not in facade, that somehow it's not resolved to me. The other issue I have is the 43. And the idea that you can't see it, you push it back and you make this huge spatial thing in the back. Makes sense according to our rules. But it's somehow, it's just too much. I would tend to think that it should be reduced to something. And even pushing it back might not be enough for me. I think it had to be reducing this grand staircase and all that stuff could be done a different way. So I think the scale of the addition should be reduced, at least one floor more, and figure out another way to put the grand stair.
Okay, and then just in terms of the proportions, so did you agree with Commissioner Goldblum in terms of the regularize? Okay. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, I tend to have similar reactions to the proposal. On 41, I think that the taller second floor makes sense. I do also feel that the top floor being taller right now feels a bit sandwiched, the 3 floors in between, and as opposed to a sense of progression. As it is proposed now, I would probably just make the top floor the same height as the 3 lower, have the whole building maybe a foot and change lower, because the crown is quite significant and would cap that top floor. But it being a taller floor, I think raises more attention to it right now unnecessarily. The 43, the rear proposed revision, I feel is appropriate and simpler and more straightforward with the brick going up higher. On 43, I do appreciate the retention of the facade and understand that they're adding onto it and across and doing significant structural work in between. I do think that as essentially more or less a new building with retaining and restoring the facade, that the additions being the mansard roof or mansard floor, as well as the double suite on top, I would think from a design perspective that those additions would aesthetically be more in keeping with each other. When I look at it, my reaction is two. One is aesthetic, and that they seem like separate additions done, but this is all being designed and built at once. I actually preferred the simplicity of a precedent that was shown. I think it was 53 Mercer, the 2-floor addition had a similar language. It felt like a unified addition to an existing building, which in fact what this situation is. I think it's overcomplicated in its profile and detailing. I also think that it is slightly too prominent in mass. I would leave it up to the applicant to find a solution to either simplify the facade as well as its sense of mass. I think Michael's comment about pushing it back makes sense to me. I think that's one way to do it. It's sort of like they created a courtyard up at the top. I would just get rid of the front piece and push it back and keep the same sloping language that the mansard below has. And pushing it back would reduce its visibility as well. Other than that, I do think that the detail, I appreciate a slight modern interpretation of the cast iron facade. The Finn language is interesting but curious to me. Some renderings, I just think this needs to be checked very carefully from a detail perspective, because some of the plate conditions I feel could look quite messy in actual realization. I also am not a big fan of the putting netting inside those reveals. I think it's going to look terrible. In that situation, I would propose putting a plate that sets back and just having it consistent with the aesthetic of the whole detail. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Kimbe?
Yes, I echo many of the comments of my fellow commissioners, starting at 41 Mercer. I'm in agreement that the uppermost floor or the top floor at the was that the 5th floor should be in keeping with the other floors below. I believe it would be a more cleaner look and give a more sense of the ascension of the facade itself. I appreciate a lot of the items that the applicant has looked at in trying to make it more harmonious. At 41 being the balcony removal. I believe that's the right move. I appreciate the detailing of the storefront at 43, and also the rearranging of the rear facade at 43. I guess the biggest thing I'm having issue with is actually the massing of the rooftop addition being tripartite at this point. And in that case, it's actually overpowering a lot of just the existing building itself. And I think that's maybe one of the issues that I'm having. I agree with that the addition should be more seamless in its approach and its materiality and its composition. And I do believe it would benefit if its height was lowered.
Thank you. Commissioner Walter?
Yes, thank you. Thanks to the applicant for the presentation as well as receiving the comments that were presented last time and making revisions based on those comments. I think I'm in agreement with everyone else in terms of the top floor. I think the moves to at least I guess the change from previous to now was just making the third floor or fourth floor in line with the third and fifth floors, and leaving that top floor the same. But I think in doing that and making that change, it kind of brings too much attention to that top floor, and so I think it should be similar in height to the other floors. Also adding to the point of Commissioner Chu, it does have a pretty prominent cornice as well, which makes it look even taller. So I think that floor should definitely be in line with the other floors. I agree that the storefront on 43, the changes made there make more sense and seem more appropriate. I agree the balcony change was a good move as well as the design of the rooftop addition and simplifying it and making the overall design a little more cohesive than what was there before. I think I do have a problem. I do have a problem with the overall height, as it does almost seem as if it's doubling the existing building. So I think because it is a double height space, there is some room to reduce the height. And I would suggest that the applicant take a look into that. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
So in general, I agree with my fellow commissioners. I think Commissioner Chu's suggestions are pretty much in line with where I'd be, except I don't like at the column detail, the idea of the plates. The mesh may be all right, but I also don't think it'd be the end of the world if it was back to what was originally and potentially put spikes to prevent birds from nesting, or just let the birds nest. I'm not sure that's so horrible. You know, if it's probably not big enough for hawks, which I know is what the city people are really, the birders really like. But I just, the solution may be worse than the problem. So I think following largely what Commissioner Chu and my fellow commissioners said, I think we can get to a good solution.
Thank you. Commissioner Mahan?
Thank you for the presentation and the revisions to simplify the design after the public hearing. I struggled with this application last time, and I continue to. And for me, it's about sort of, I think, more fundamental issues than, let's say the birds, to pick on one example. I fully support and want to see new development in historic districts, and I think the kind of contemporary interpretation of historic architecture is an entirely appropriate way to do that, if not the only way. I struggle with the way in which that approach is executed in this proposal. I find it to be neither contemporary enough nor historic enough, and I find the contemporary interpretation to be a kind of misinterpretation of Soho architecture. Perhaps I don't know how many folks spoke about the bird issue at the public hearing, but my issue was with the sort of geometry and the expression of the pilasters, not so much whether birds could roost within them or not. There was a kind of another building's profile was scanned, and then, scaled, adjusted, and interpreted. The relevance of that other building's profile, find questionable. And then what is the result? I think the amount of interpretation perhaps is not enough, or perhaps the source material is not the right one. I'm afraid I'm unconvinced that the geometry of these pilasters is going to be beautiful, to just put it, plainly. As Commissioner Chu mentioned, I think some of the detailing, the plates of them is going to be awkward. They lack hierarchy. They lack a relationship to sort of historic profiles of individual pilasters. An entire building has been shrunken down in this instance. And then I find the irregular on-off expression of transparency versus opacity within the two bins, demarcating a pilaster to be problematic as well. So, for me, it's a more fundamental issue in the way that historic architecture of this district is reinterpreted in a contemporary manner. As to the other issues mentioned by the other commissioners, I agree the top floor of 41 should be lowered to match the floors below it, while I'm okay with the second floor being taller. I find the rooftop accretions of both buildings to be problematic. I think there's too much on 41, and I think it's, when all is said and done, the mechanical equipment, somewhat oddly behind a glass rail, is going to be fully enclosed because of zoning regulations, and this building is going to look even taller. And then I think the rooftop addition on 43 is too much, and should be reduced in scale via the elimination of one or more floors. The rear facade is much improved from last time, and is okay as is.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen?
Agree with many of the comments of the fellow commissioners. To thank the applicant for refining and listening, but it's not quite there yet. I think I have no problem with the rear facade. I think he made a nice improvement over it. I agree with the commissioners about the height of the second floor could be taller, and that's consistent with this historic pattern in this area. What's been alluded to is obviously clearly the top and the detailing. It needs to be tweaked and adjusted, and so therefore I will not add on to the difficult, because there are many different variation permutations that can be derived, but I don't think the top is quite there yet, and I will not confuse the discussion any further.
Thank you. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is we're going to take no action, but I think the commissioners have been very positive about the storefront design, the rear facade. They like that you simplified the composition. A lot of them said that the top floor on 41, the height should be regularized. And then a lot of the issues, I think, really surround the rooftop addition on 43. Whether it's being simplified, whether it's being pushed back, or whether it's being lowered by one floor. So, perhaps you can work with staff and we can bring you back at a later time.
Okay, we'll now move to our public hearing agenda, starting with public hearing item number 1. It's LPC 26-08142, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 241, Lot 123. 10 Pierrepont Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. This is a neo-Renaissance style row house designed by J.C. Cady and built in circa 1895. And the application is to install an areaway lift and construct a rooftop bulkhead and railings.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is John Shippers. I'm here with my colleague, Jen Balut.
We're from Steeringhouse Design and Development, here to talk to you about 10 Pierrepont Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. This is a project near and dear to my own heart. It's my childhood home, so I know it intimately. Jenna has done most of the drawing, but given my connection to the property, I'm going to present to you today. And if there's any questions, she'll be on hand to answer them for you. Let's see. So, of course, 10 Pierrepont Street, Brooklyn Heights Historic District. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Here is our block plan. Tax photos, 1940s on the left, 80s in the middle, and existing conditions on the right. Not too much has changed over the decades, thankfully. And here is our proposed facade work. Much of the work is restorative and being managed at staff level. Our conversation today is about two interventions. One, at the bottom left of the proposed facade, or elevation on the right, and a bulkhead at the roof. Actually, let me go back and just point out that this is a non-traditional stoop condition on a row house. As you can see, there is not a traditional garden floor entrance. And what we're trying to do is deal with accessibility issues because currently there is no way to provide step-free entrance into the building. And so at the bottom left, you'll see we are proposing a mechanical lift providing access to the cellar level. Here we have existing conditions. Most of the work will be restorative. And if you look at the photo in the middle, you'll see the steps down to the cellar level. That's where our proposed work is focused. Let me jump ahead. As you can see here on the right, the stairs down to the cellar are proposed to be replaced with that mechanical lift. On the left, you can see another drawing of that. This photo is here to represent what is proposed. Our lift is going to be custom manufactured nearby by the same manufacturer that did this version. And in a minute, we'll show you a rendering. But when the lift is closed, it will appear as it does on the image on the right. Here we have a couple sections of the proposed lift. Additional sections. I'm going to pause for a minute and focus on the drawing on the left. We do have to modify the existing door condition to the cellar slightly. And as we do that and enlarge the opening, we're going to preserve some of the existing facade material and use it as infill above, which I'll show you in a minute. And here's just photos of those existing conditions. The window on the right is going to be proposed to be infilled, and the door will be modified. Here are the existing sidewalk conditions, and existing and proposed. More existing conditions. We will have to modify the curb detail that you see hatched in red there. The proposal is just to saw cut it and square off all the edges so that it mirrors the existing conditions now, just with a wider opening. And here we have on the right a rendering of the proposed condition post lift installation. The top of it is proposed as a diamond hatch steel cover, similar to what you might see at the front of a traditional row house. And the door behind, that's where we are proposing to infill the space above the lift with the preserved material from below. It's reading a little dark here just because of the shadows, but it is proposed to be the same limestone facade material. And this is the controls for the lift, which are proposed to be recessed into the existing masonry. So that's the conclusion of the lift portion. And now we're going to turn our attention to the roof, where we're proposing a bulkhead. The images on the left are the existing conditions. Here are some drawings of our proposed bulkhead, the mock-up, existing conditions and sightline, proposed sightline from across Pierrepont Street. You can see that the proposed bulkhead will not be visible. And here are the existing conditions with the mock-up in place. You can see that the proposed bulkhead is not visible from across Pierrepont Street. However, Willow runs perpendicular to Pierrepont Street. So as you begin to walk down Willow Street, the proposed bulkhead does come into view. The image in the middle demonstrates that, and on the right, you can see a mock-up of our chimney flue extension. Zoomed in image on the left, showing that mock-up of the bulkhead and front railing and chimney extension. On the right, you can see the rendered proposed materials. We are proposing the bulkhead in a sand color to blend in with the building behind. And the railing is proposed in black painted ironwork. As you can see, the interesting windows below the roof line, they have existing black ironwork on it. So we're just repeating that material and color above. The building next door, number 8 Pierrepont Street, has an existing bulkhead, which you can see highlighted in red there. There's also an existing railing, which is visible also from the same vantage point down Willow. Here it is mocked up. At staff's suggestion, we were able to lower the railing by a few inches. Originally, we had proposed it at the same elevation as number 8 Pierrepont Street, but found that reducing it is possible while still maintaining code requirements and also slightly reducing its visibility. This is a view from Montague Street. There is a small break in the street wall. And as you can see on the image on the left, there is a viewpoint to the proposed railing and bulkhead at the top of 10 Pierrepont Street. It's zoomed in there on the right. And for precedent, also on Montague Street, about a block and a half away, there is another proposed visible bulkhead above the food. And that concludes our presentation, again, showing the proposed lift on the left and bulkhead and railing on the right. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Jefferson?
The visibility issue. Did the community board approve it, or they thought, what did the community board think about the visibility issue?
I can note what the community board said in their resolution. They recommend approval on the condition that the rooftop railing be pushed further back and a railing return be added. A railing return, so like a 90-degree angled part of the railing that would connect to the structure for safety.
If I may. Hello, I'm Jenna. So when we presented to the community board, it was before we were able to lower the railing, and we also didn't have that return. But we were able to lower the railing and also return it over here. If you can see where my cursor is, that's what they're referring to.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Chu?
I'm just trying, the lift at the front here, you had shown this rendering on the left, but is the door top remain as it opening? I'm not sure I understood the section.
Okay. So we wanna maintain the impression that there was a door over there.
Right.
The door to the cellar is now gonna be below the hatch. So we're treating the portion of the existing door above the hatch as a blind window. So we're gonna use the salvaged limestone and have like a 4-inch recess. It's a bit deceiving in this, or tricky to understand in this rendering because of the dark shadow, but it's actually, this section could demonstrate what we're talking about.
It's limestone recessed to be an infill in a historic opening, essentially. Oh, okay.
So over here, you can see, so we had to lower because, yeah.
Because you're excavating down further for the cellar.
Correct.
Finished floor.
Correct.
That'll actually be, the bottom of that is the door height.
Correct.
Okay.
So we had to extend the opening, the door down to make it taller, to provide head height, but we wanted to keep the impression of the existing door
opening,
above.
but it's still an infill of masonry.
Precisely, exactly.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, is there anybody in the room who would like to speak on this item? Noting that there isn't, let me turn it over to Stephen Thompson to see if we have remote testimony.
Those on Zoom wishing to speak, please raise your hand, after which you'll be promoted to panelist. We ask you to unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes to speak. The first speaker will be Judy Stanton.
Judy Stanton, speaking for the Brooklyn Heights Association. We support this application. However, we note that there will be complicated geometry between the altered curb, the sloping sidewalk, the new lift entryway, and the iron gate. And there are no detailed drawings submitted with the proposal today. So we suggest that the applicant work with staff to confirm all aspects before starting work. This will be necessary in any case to provide a smooth and safe entry experience from the sidewalk through the curb cut and into the lift area. However, we also think that it is equally important for aesthetic reasons. The applicant should work out in advance the dimensions and appearance of the newly cut faces and edges of the curb. The relationship between the gate bottom and curb threshold should also be studied. Today, the gate bottom is parallel with the curb top, but it could be awkward if the gate no longer appears parallel to the ground when the curb is altered. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else joining via Zoom who wishes to speak? That's all.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to any of the comments?
I think we understand the Brooklyn Heights Association's comments, and there are details that do need to be figured out. We just want to get approval first before diving in because they're very technical things.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, if not, let's go ahead and close the hearing. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Mahan, would you second that?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearings are closed. Commissioner Kumbe, would you like to start this discussion?
Sure. Overall, I'm finding what is being proposed to be appropriate. It looks like in order to introduce this lift, it's very minimal from a visual perspective. And I can understand including this blind window to maintain the character of an existing opening, even though it's no longer being used in that manner. I agree that the applicant should work with staff just to make sure all the detailing actually works well. As for the rooftop bulkhead, I find it appropriate. It's modestly scaled just for its use. And even in the materiality, just trying to make it blend in more into the background. I also find the railing to be fine as presented.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, I think in general, I find this application appropriate. It was a pretty clever way to get the lift down there by the side of the stair. There are many conditions that could accommodate that. I think the only comment I have is the rail at the roof, and I think that having it is fine. My recommendation here is that they move the rail back to the back side of the chimney riser, which is essentially 1.5 feet or 2 back. And I think that makes its sightline from the street level totally disappear. It's a minimal reduction in area. There's still a lot of roof up there. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I think it's carefully done, and I think the aerial way of thinking through it was well done. I agree with my fellow commissioner tonight that moving back would make total sense. That's visibility.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree. It's appropriate, but I approach Steve.
Team Stephen. Okay. Commissioner Chen,
And you can put me as another one down as well.
okay, and Commissioner Mahan,
Agreed. And clever, clever way to get down. And I've never seen that left of the board. Nice job.
and Commissioner Ginsburg.
Agreed, and I do want to also highlight that lift is pretty elegant solution and appreciate it.
And agreed as in the railing should come back.
Yeah, I
Okay,
agree with my
okay,
fellow
good.
commissioners.
Okay, and then Commissioner Walder.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kumbe, would you like to read the motion and perhaps ask them to push the railing back?
Yes. In the matter of LPC 26-08142, 10 Pierrepont Street, Brooklyn Heights Historic District, a neo-Renaissance style row house designed by J.C. Caddy and built in circa 1895. This application is to install an areaway lift and construct a rooftop bulkhead and railing. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate nor damage the significant architectural features, that the proposed lift installation within the areaway will provide barrier-free access to the basement in the least intrusive manner possible, that the flush metal lift cover and associated changes to the facade areaway and curb will be at a below grade and largely screened from view by the gate and flanking stoop and walls. That the proposed lift control box will be small in size and flush mounted in plain masonry on the outside of the stoop cheek wall. That the proposed standing seam metal clad cream colored rooftop bulkhead, black metal picket railing and gray flues will be set back from the front facade and will be simple in design, typical in materials, and neutral in finish. That the slope bulkhead will only be seen in limited views on the public thoroughfares over the front facade against the background of secondary facades of neighboring building and incidental views and gaps between buildings. That the railing and flues will only be seen at a distance and against the background of a taller building and or near existing railing and flues of similar heights and visibility, and that the work will not deteriorate from the special architecture and historic character of the building or the historic district. I also note that the applicant should work at moving the railings back a little further to reduce its visibility from the street.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chu, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quimby,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passed.
Okay, that's been approved with modifications. Please work with staff and just push the railing back. Thank you. Let's move to the next item.
Right, I'll note we are a little bit behind schedule, but we're going to do this next item before we break for lunch. That is public hearing item number 2, LPC 26-08043, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 274, Lot 14, 91 Atlantic Avenue in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. This is a Greek revival style commercial building built circa 1850 to 60, and the application is to construct a rooftop addition and railings.
Hello, Commissioner. My name is Caterina Roiatti, principal of PL Studio. The application is for the restoration and a small addition on a unusual loft building on Atlantic Avenue near 6th Street. It is very unusual for 2 reasons. It is 35 feet wide, is only 2 stories. But more than that, it was a single family originally with a store on the ground floor and a residence on top. We know that from the research of the building department. Our client, David Alperin, is here, and he is actually intends to bring the building back to its original use. So I think it's an unusual kind of application, and I think it's great. I'm gonna next. Okay, yeah. Okay, this is a summary slide. I'll try to be brief in my presentation. So this kind of summarizes the whole application and the scope of work. On top is are the existing conditions, and below is the extent of the work. In yellow is where we are indeed proposing to do any work. So there is restoration of, parts of the facade, a new door at the ground floor, certain restoration of the cornice, repairs in the back. All of this has been approved at staff level. And then we have a small addition on top. We'll talk very much in detail about it. Shortly, it is pushed all the way back to the building, and it's really minimal. It's a minimal room when you get off from the stair below. Of course, we have a railing, but that is kind of unavoidable. I'm going back. That's not a good thing. That's good. Okay, great, thanks. Okay, this is the historical research, historic photos. The important thing is really that the door that we're replacing was not original. We are doing it, of course, with the help of the staff in kind to all the doors of this type of building. And I just want to kind of get your attention to the last building on the left of our building, because there were railings on top of this building, even at the time, in 1940s. So it's kind of an unavoidable element. These are photos from Atlantic Avenue. They are mainly to illustrate what you may see or may not see with the addition later. They are from the public way, from all the usual kind of corners, the correct distancing below. A view of the facade. Again, all the work on the facade has been done at that level, but we thought it would be important to kind of look at it and look at the conditions. It does need repairs, so the repairs are necessary. This image, I think is important because it's a little bit the inspiration for our addition. In the 20s, there was kind of a rage or a passion of building small cottages, very modest, on top of buildings in the village and other small residential buildings. Some were in temporary nature, some remained until today. The one below was owned by the actor John Barrymore, and it has been restored carefully. They're actually very kind of sweet and in a way appropriate, because they certainly didn't overwhelm the building below. We also looked at penthouse additions in general, on small residential buildings, but mainly for the kind of divisions of the glass, the rhythm of the moment. That's really important. And then the last image, you are familiar with it, I'm sure, is 10,000 Tribeca, where the volumes have been shaped to follow the viewing line from the street. And one more thing is also clad in zinc. We are using a similar material, and which is appropriate for manufacturing. Again, summarizing everything, these are the interventions. it shows, of course, the addition at the top. You can also see the rear facade and the work that's being done to stabilize. The extent of the work on the roof, where you see the lines with the roof, the rest is deck, so it's at kind of roof level, and the mechanical volumes have been minimized and located as much as possible, not to be visible. In fact, they're not. These are 3D views of the whole intervention. The extent of the addition is shown in the enlarged view. These views are taken from all the 4 points that you saw in the pictures before. We have a railing. The railing is located 6 feet from the facade. That is the fireman landing. If it was pushed back in further, it would create another unprotected roof, so you would have to put the railing again. So we did go through it, and we can now push it any further than it. These are view of the mock-up with the addition in place and the railing in place. And they are exactly the same as the one that you saw in line way. A section of the small addition with the viewing lines from Atlantic Avenue taken from the furthest point, and the railing, the distance from the front facade. These are the actual drawings of this new addition. I just want to bring to your attention that we try to minimize the height. At the kind of side walls, the height of the wall is only 8 feet. So it's really as minimal as it can be. It is clad in standing seam metal with a zinc, weather zinc kind of finish. And then one side, of course, is glass, but that's not the side that's physical. A section more in detail with dimensions. So you can see them, but again, the height is 8 feet at the side walls. And it also, just for information, it shows the interior of the loft and the scale of it, the described on the side. There is a spiral stair going up. We pushed it again as far as we could to the back. This is only about the railing and the location of the railing. Not much to say, it is where it has to be. And these are kind of rendered axonometrics of the materials, of the small addition, of the deck, noted. Again, more kind of close-up of height or dimensions and so on. And this is the railing. We are proposing minimal upright metal with expanded mesh in between. I think that's the most appropriate type of railing for kind of what is manufacturing industrial building. And this is my presentation.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, Commissioner Jefferson.
To go back, okay. Okay. Oh, well, the one you want. One is close to Atlantic Avenue on the curve, and the other one is standing all the way against the building, which may never happen.
The standard is the most visible line of sight from a 6-foot eyeball height. So it's the further
For
The
the
furthest.
back is, yeah.
They are doing that. And in fact, the only reason this is before you is because the staff rules don't allow for rooftop additions that are occupiable to be visible at all. Otherwise, this would qualify as minimally visible for the
Yeah.
staff rules if it was just a stair bulkhead alone. And the railing kind of comes along with it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Very
Commissioner Chu?
simple question. The rendering you provide of the roof standing seam, oh, I think it's on.
Yeah,
That's just a rendering. That's not a standing seam detail. And so,
it's a type of cladding
Yeah.
that is actually from marine
Oh, it's
metal work.
fabricated.
It comes
Profile that-
made.
Okay.
So I actually think it will be very well built
Okay.
because it does come already prepared, and that was in some way a requirement that we had. We
Really
didn't
wanted
want
those
somebody, we
lines.
wanted something very well built, very straight, very,
Thank you. Okay.
particularly the corner between the wall and the roof.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Jefferson?
There's no gutter. So the water comes down and hits the roof. And where does it go?
I don't have the technical drawing here, but we did, it actually, it goes on the roof and then it goes to the back where we have a gutter because it all slopes down. The deck is not something that is stopping the water.
How was that? Okay.
The deck is just suspended.
Okay. If there aren't any other questions, is there anybody in the room who would like to speak on this item? Noting that there isn't, let's turn it over to Stephen Thompson to see if you have any remote testimony.
Those joining via Zoom who wish to speak, please raise your hand. After your name is called, you'll be promoted to panelist, and we ask you to unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. The first speaker is Judy Stanton.
Judy Stanton speaking for the Brooklyn Heights Association. We support this application and find it appropriate to the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else joining via Zoom who wishes to speak? Seeing none, I'll note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 2 recommends approval on the condition that the railing be pushed further back.
Did you want to comment on that?
Yes, we did look at it, but, unfortunately, if you push it back, you created an unprotected roof. So you have to put the railing forward to that railing. It just doesn't, you can only have 6 feet for the fireman landing. It will give a kind of sense to people that that's the end of the roof. You move it back and they'll walk there.
Thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? Okay, let's go ahead and close the hearing. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you make a motion to
So
close the
moved.
hearing? Commissioner Mahan, would you second that?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this discussion?
I think it's totally appropriate when I saw it before. And then I had these questions that were small scale, this image. And then thought simply, why not just move the fence back? Why not? And I still don't understand why we can't do that.
Code requires that the fence be within 6 feet of the edge.
It can only be 6 feet.
Yeah,
away from the edge of
So
the-
they're going back as far as they can legally,
That's the code,
the code, yeah.
therefore. I can approve this.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum? Thank you. Commissioner Chen? Commissioner Mahan?
Sure.
Okay. Does anybody have other thoughts? Okay, let's go ahead and read the motion.
Microphone.
the matter of LPC 26-08-043, 91 Atlantic Avenue, Brooklyn Heights Historic District. Applications to construct a rooftop addition and railing. I note that the building style, scale, material, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historical character of the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed rooftop addition and railing will only be minimally visible from a limited area across Atlantic Avenue. That the partial width one-story rooftop addition will be set back from the front into the facade, maintaining a sense of the building's original massive, that the neutral gray finish of the railing and gray standing seam metal cladding at the addition will help these elements to recede. And that the work will not detract from any special architectural or historical character of the building or the historic district.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that? Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Klemberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson, Commissioner Mann,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
With 9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, that's been approved. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move to lunch. It is 12:48 now. So let's go ahead and come back at 1:20. And we're going to ask all members of the public on Zoom to voluntarily exit at this time so that you don't experience technical difficulties returning in the afternoon session. If we have